Chapter 723. Why aren't you talking? Are you running out of spiritual energy again? The bigger fetus was not born yet, but he was already acting like an elder brother. Especially when he looked at the smaller fetus, his noble and indifferent eyes were very similar to Beligaju's. However, he was still young, so he had not fully learned how to be shrewd yet. Only his overbearing and concern were particularly prominent. The smaller fetus shook his head. His weak voice had an inexplicable sense of strategizing. This is the Exorcist City. The spiritual energy in the Exorcist City is very abundant. Big brother, you don't have to worry about me. But for the next 2 days, don't go out to get food at night. I'm afraid that someone will find you. The bigger fetus naturally understood what the smaller fetus said. Now that both of them had not fully grown up, their relationship was better than usual. Twin demons were like this. Protecting and killing were their instincts. For example, when it came to the issue of Helly and Vivian, even their father would not dare to hurt their mother. Not to mention others. The two fetuses had already decided that they would protect their mother along the way. As for their father, they believed that anyone who provoked that great demon would not live long, so they did not have to worry about him at all. The two fetuses knew this, but Ni did not. Everyone in the Ni family did not know either. At this moment, they were celebrating, as if they had already won this competition. After Ni listened to the rules of the competition, he laughed even more arrogantly. Father, you're the one with the best ideas. The Zhuge family can't even find 3 capable exorcists in their entire family, let alone accept the challenge. I reckon they won't even dare to participate in the competition anymore. They must be thinking about how to give up now. Ni Biao glanced at him and said in a much calmer voice, next time, you should practice more Taoist techniques. Don't go out and become a joke to the Ni family if you don't know anything. I know. Father, you don't know about the situation today. I was about to win and almost broke Zhuge Yun's hand. I could have made the Zhuge family behave themselves. Who would have thought that 2 exorcists would suddenly appear out of nowhere and start a fight? Ni replied, feeling aggrieved. He then added, Father, you don't know what happened today. Ni Biao's face darkened when he heard this. After so many years, he had rarely heard of anyone who dared to provoke the Ni family. His eyes were filled with anger, but he did not take these 2 people seriously. To him, they were just young people who had just arrived and did not know the rules at all. I've heard about what happened to you. Don't take those 2 people to heart. Ni Biao's voice was obviously nonchalant. Your uncle did a background check on them. He had never heard of their names in the exorcist world. They probably learned something and dared to cause trouble in the Exorcist City because they thought they knew a lot. They're not worth mentioning at all. Ni hummed in agreement, then grimaced in pain. He covered his face and said, these 2 people have been helping the Ni family since the beginning. Even after the child reported his name, they still didn't repent. It's obvious that they don't care about the Ni family. Regardless of whether they are newcomers or not, Father, we have to teach them a lesson and let them know the rules. You don't have to say this, I will do it. Ni Biao's voice deepened as well, no one can escape unscathed after hitting my son. It's best not to cross the line during this period of time. Once we get the Saraira, I'll make them pay for what they did to you. As the saying goes, like son, like father. Ni's arrogance was closely related to Ni Biao's arrogance. It was just that Ni Biao was more cunning. For example, in dealing with Zhuge Yun, he had already made up his mind to deal with this disobedient teenager. However, none of the exorcists in the Exorcist City could see through his plan. He joined forces with the other 2 families to ostracize the Zhuge family. In less than 2 days, that ungrateful kid would not be able to hold on. This was only the first step in Ni Biao's plan. In the future, he would control the power of each family in his hands and become the king of the Exorcist City. By then, all the exorcists would only listen to his orders. Even the emperors of the various dynasties in the divine mainland would have to show him some respect. This was what his eldest daughter, the reincarnation of the Phoenix girl, told him. In the past, he did not believe in the rumor that the one who had the Phoenix Girl would rule the world. Now, he believed in everything. However, the prerequisite was that he must get the Saraira. While Ni Biao was thinking, the noise in the hall gradually quieted down. Everyone looked at the door and saw a woman in a plain white robe with a fur hood walking in. Ever since the woman walked in, everyone seemed to have stopped breathing. This was because the woman's appearance was too fairy-like. Her entire person carried an indescribable grace. Her fair and transparent skin coupled with her soft facial features made her look like the goddess of mercy. Even her long sleeves fluttered with spirituality. Her temperament was very clean. When she walked past the crowd, she carried a unique elegance. Her thin lips parted slightly and her voice was very soft. "Father. It's Miss Ni Feng. This is a rare sight. Didn't they say that Miss Ni Feng has not appeared in front of people for a long time? Today's trip was really worth it." "Yes, can you feel the spiritual aura coming from her? She is indeed the reincarnation of the Phoenix Girl. Only the Phoenix Girl would have such abundant spiritual aura." Ni Biao listened to the praises coming from all directions and looked at his beloved daughter. His face was full of pride as he said with a smile, "Come and sit down. The kitchen made your favorite chestnut cake today. You like to eat this in winter." Ni Feng glanced at the cake on the plate but did not touch it. She just smiled and said, "Thank you, Father. I heard that the rules of the competition are out." Ni Biao took a sip of tea and said, "Yes, the rules of the competition are out. I am also one of the judges. Feng, your body is weak, so don't be distracted by these trivial matters. Don't worry, this time no one can stop the Ni family. Even that ignorant Zhuge Yun will not appear in the competition. I have taken care of everything. When the time comes, you only need to complete your task and reach the entrance of the tomb as soon as possible. I know that this may be dangerous for others, but it is a piece of cake for you. However, the journey will be dangerous, so you must rest well these 2 days." "Okay." Ni Feng agreed and coughed a few times. The smell of medicine filled her sleeves. "Why are you coughing again?" Ni Biao looked at her worriedly. Ni Feng did not speak. She just covered her mouth with a white handkerchief as if she was absorbing something. Chapter 724. Ni who found it strange as he watched from the side. He always felt that his elder sister was different from before ever since she fell ill, but he could not pinpoint what was different about her. Whenever his father asked her questions, she would always be distracted. Just like now, Ni who really did not know what was on her mind. He just did not understand why his father would look a little relaxed every time his elder sister finished talking to him. Ni who saw that no one spoke for a long time, so he went over with a cup and put his hand on Ni Feng's shoulder. "Elder sister, if you're not feeling well, do you want to go back first?" Ni Feng paused for a moment, then coughed and said, "It's late, ahem, the banquet has just begun. Would it be inappropriate for me to leave now?" Old Master Ni seemed to have regained his senses at this moment. He didn't know what had happened, but he was originally quite energetic, but he actually felt very sleepy at that moment. Now that the wind blew, he felt much better. He smiled at Ni Feng and said, "There's nothing inappropriate about it. The people who came are all my father's friends. Besides, they should know by now that the exorcist city is in charge. If you and your sister feel uncomfortable, you can leave first. Hu Zi, send your elder sister back. Be careful, don't let anyone touch her." "Yes, father." Ni who was arrogant outside, but he did not dare to be too presumptuous at home, especially in front of his elder sister. He did not know why, but he always felt a sense of fear. "Elder sister, let's go back." Ni who walked in front to lead the way. Ni Feng nodded and followed behind him. She was still coughing when she walked, but the spiritual aura in her body was more abundant than before. Ni who thought to himself that he must have been blind just now to feel that there was a hidden aura in his elder sister. It was obviously spiritual power. Where did the Yin aura come from? Hu Zi, you can just send me here. I still want to walk around outside. If there's nothing else, you can go back first. There are so many distinguished guests in the Exorcist city, you should help me entertain them. Ni Feng's manner of speaking was just like the feeling she gave off, full of gentleness. Ni who did not really want to go to the backyard. There were so many people in the front yard. The program had just begun, and there would be people dancing later. He was waiting to watch, but he was worried about his elder sister's health. Elder sister, be careful when you walk around. It's cold outside, bring an extra heater. Okay. Ni Feng nodded at him with a smile. She lowered her eyes and coughed a few times. Then I'll be leaving. Ni who was very anxious to go back. After walking for a while, he seemed to have thought of something and looked back. When he saw that Ni Feng was still standing in the same spot, the strange feeling came back again. Then, he shook his head and walked toward the reception area. The night grew darker and darker. A cold wind blew, and the bare trees swayed back and forth like a human figure baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. Originally, Exorcist City was supposed to be the safest place in the world. Who would have thought that on this day, one of the fetuses in Hellion Vivian's stomach seemed to have sensed something. Its originally demonic red eyes suddenly opened, revealing a faint light in its eyes. Big brother, did something happen? The smaller fetus looked at the bigger fetus and woke up. The bigger fetus hummed in agreement. His voice was faint, but there was a hint of evil in it. This Exorcist City is not normal. When the fetus heard this, his eyes lit up like flowing blood. They should be here for the relic. Will they do harm to Mother? If they dare to make a move, Father will definitely beat them until their souls fly out of their bodies. The bigger fetus snorted. That man is quite useful at critical moments. Don't worry, I'm here. Even if Father is useless, I'll protect you and Mother. Mother can't be hurt now. Your body is already weak. If you can't keep up with the spiritual energy, you'll be in danger too. I won't allow that to happen. The smaller fetus was indeed weak. After humming in agreement, he hugged the bigger fetus and closed his eyes. However, the bigger fetus did not sleep. He mobilized the spiritual energy around him and gave it all to the sleeping smaller fetus. What they did not know was that Beligaju had also woken up. He glanced at Hellion Vivian in his arms, then quietly retracted his arms. He put on a fur coat and walked out of the room. His perfect and handsome side profile exuded a strong sense of asceticism. Black feathers fell beside his feet one by one as he walked. Fire Qilin and Azure Dragon were summoned at the same time and appeared in front of him. Master. Go and find out what happened to the Yin Qi just now. Beligaju's tone was very indifferent. As ancient divine beasts, Fire Qilin and Azure Dragon were not best at tracking Yin Qi. However, compared to the shadows, they were much more useful. At least they could intimidate the spiritual beasts around them and obtain some information. However, what was puzzling was that the Exorcist City was very peaceful. It was as if the Yin Qi that appeared at night was just an illusion. The next day, the sky in the Exorcist City was still clear and boundless. Even the air was fresher than in the capital. The continuous flow of spiritual energy was also very abundant. Except for Hellion Vivian, everyone was full of energy. Hellion Vivian was very sleepy. She just wanted to sleep, but she could not sleep well. She kept feeling like something was pressing down on her chest, making her feel even more hungry. Logically speaking, she should not feel tired after sleeping for so long. However, her body's reaction was very obvious. She had no choice but to pick more strawberries to eat. However, she did not expect that a large patch of strawberries in the fantasy space would dry up. What's going on? Hellion Wei Wei seemed to have suddenly woken up. She had never encountered such a situation before. To her, the celestial boundary space was like a treasure that she didn't need to worry about. Whenever she needed it, this treasure could give her a lot of things. Hellion Vivian was not a greedy person. From the moment she obtained the fantasy space, she knew that there was a limit to energy. She had always been cultivating and absorbing. Before she was pregnant, she collected spiritual energy and put it in the fantasy space to maintain the space. Logically speaking, there should not be any problems with the fantasy space at all. But now, the fantasy space was showing signs of drying up. This made Hellion Vivian frown heavily. If she did not have the fantasy space before, it would have been fine. But now, her body needed spiritual energy to replenish. Although she had not talked to the baby in her belly, she knew very well that the baby needed these things. How could this be? Everything was fine before he came, so why did the fantasy space begin to show signs of drying up after just one night? Why was this? Chapter 725. Logically speaking, the spiritual energy in the exorcist city was so abundant, it was impossible for such a thing to happen. Unless, this spiritual energy was not real spiritual energy? Probably because of Hellion Vivian's previous work, she had an extraordinary intuition when it came to observation. Her intuition told her that there was a problem in the exorcist city, and the problem lay in the spiritual energy. Little White. Hellion Vivian had not called Little White and Little Black for a long time in order to conserve energy. Now that something had happened, she had to be on guard. Little White's figure didn't change, but there was an obvious change in her eyes. Pure amber, clear and cold. I'm here. The competition will start tomorrow. From the start to the entrance of the tomb, it will take more than a day. During these few days, you will stay in the fantasy space and make sure that the strawberries won't die because of the depletion of spiritual energy. Hellion Vivian was used to arranging things carefully. She did not know how long the strawberries could support her body, but at least she had to protect the ones that survived. Little White was a spiritual beast, so its spiritual energy would be useful for the strawberries. Okay. Little White nodded and said, but woman, this is not a simple matter. There is actually someone in the exorcist city who can tamper with the spiritual energy without being detected. In addition to a clever method, it must be a powerful and heaven-defying technique. You have to be more careful in tomorrow's competition. I understand. Hellion Weiwei also knew that the situation this time was different from any other time. Aside from the condition of her body, there was another thing that made her feel uneasy, and that was the spiritual aura that permeated the air. What exactly was it used for? Hellion Vivian had something on her mind, so she was absent-minded when eating. At the Zhuge family's dining table, there were two outsiders besides her and Beligaju, the Zhuge mother and son. But this did not affect His Highness's feeding. Unlike the others, he barely ate a few mouthfuls of food, but Hellion Vivian's small plate was piled with food. Madame Zhuge was smart. She looked at Beligaju and smiled, you really know how to care for people. Hearing this, Hellion Vivian didn't avoid it. She looked up from the plate and smiled at Madame Zhuge. Beligaju looked at Hellion Vivian, whose face was flushed and the ends of her hair were sticking up. He reached out and rubbed her head. His pet was indeed pleasing to the eye. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. Did he have something to say? Bailey Jia Ju calmly tossed her another piece of bamboo shoot. Hellion Vivian could only bury her head and continue eating. Madame Zhuge saw this and remembered that the two of them were going to follow her son to the tomb. She couldn't help but say, Xiao Wei, you don't have any spiritual aura, so you should be the one who needs the most care. You should follow Yun'er and let Yun'er deal with any danger first. Do you understand? In Madame Zhuge's eyes, Hellion Vivian was probably just a child, only 3 or 4 years older than Zhuge Yun. In addition, she had already guessed the identity of the other party, so it was inevitable that she would look at Hellion Vivian with overly gentle eyes. Hellion Vivian heard Madame Zhuge's words and coughed softly. Then, she smiled and said, Madam, don't worry. I know what to do. In fact, only she knew her own ability. Compared to Madame Zhuge's worries, the Ni family had already determined that the Zhuge family couldn't send anyone to participate in the written examination. Ni who was waiting for the next morning to see Zhuge Yun make a fool of himself. After all, it was more satisfying to make such a person give up on the competition than to cripple him. Soon, the next day arrived. Countless exorcists had gathered in the exorcist city, and all of them were well hidden. Every exorcist had found their own team, and the Ni family had the most people. Although the rules of the competition stipulated that there should be at least 3 people in each team, there was no upper limit. Therefore, 3/4 of the exorcists chose to follow behind Ni Hu. On the other hand, only Zhuge Yun came from the Zhuge family. In contrast, it seemed very empty. This made Ni Hu, who was surrounded by everyone, laugh even more arrogantly. He even lifted his chin and strolled in front of Zhuge Yun. He was very disdainful. Some people don't learn until they are beaten. They really think that they are a big shot. In fact, they are even worse than a dog. Dogs even have candidates. You. Zhuge Yun clenched his hands and gritted his teeth. Ni Hu pretended to be apologetic and said, "Brother Yun, I'm not talking about you. Please don't take it personally. Speaking of which, why are you alone?" Sigh. We're all brothers. If there's really no one to choose you, I can let 2 of my family's exorcists go over and help you form a team. That way, you won't have to give up on the competition, right? As he said this, his eyes turned cold, and the corner of his mouth was still sarcastic. He lowered his voice and said, "Of course, I can't give you the person for free. You have to kneel down and kowtow to me and admit your mistake. After all, they don't want to choose the Zhuge family." He, young master and are you serious? Brother Yun still has to carry on his father's last wish. He wants to, but he can't find anyone. I'm afraid that for the sake of the competition, he will really kneel down to you. The one who said this was the young master of another faction, Shaolin Yu. Compared to Ni Hu, he was not as violent, but he liked to step on the weak and flatter the strong. Even when he spoke, he was sarcastic. Zhuge Yun was originally the most outstanding among them. Even his exorcism skills were better than theirs. However, his father passed away. So what if he was talented? He didn't know how to read people's faces. He deserved to be kicked out. To Zhuge Yun, who was also the successor of a faction, such words were simply a disgrace. Ni Hu was so overbearing because he was certain that no one would choose the Zhuge clan. Zhuge Yun was so angry that his eyes turned red. However, he knew that he could not make a move at this time. Not all of them had arrived. If he made a scene, he might really be disqualified from the competition. The competition will start in half an hour. Brother Yun, once you've thought it through, come and tell me. This condition is valid at any time. After saying this, Ni Hu and the people beside him laughed. The sarcasm in their words was obvious. Just as he was about to leave, a cold voice rang out in the air. Still not taking him seriously, the voice was very indifferent. You can take back that condition of yours. There's no need to consider anything. We have enough candidates. Ni Hu looked in the direction of the voice, and his smile froze. There were 2 people standing behind Zhuge Yun. Even in death, he would never forget those 2 people. The wounds on his face were all thanks to them. Even now, it still hurt. Most importantly, he had never suffered such humiliation since he was young. He was beaten in front of so many people. He would definitely take revenge for this. Chapter 726. Indeed, it's enough. However, this number of people can be considered to be the lowest number in history. Ni Hu turned around and continued to smile at the people behind him. At a glance, there are at least 10 exorcists in each faction. Brother Yun, you're lucky to have only 3 of them. That's quite an eye-opener. When the crowd heard this, they burst into laughter again. Zhuge Yun was a young head of the household, and he was not good with words, so he did not know how to reply. Hellion Vivian and Beligaju were different, especially the former. She smiled lazily. So what if you have more people? I remember the day before yesterday when young master and I went to the Zhuge manor to cause trouble. You also brought a lot of people with you. Didn't you still get beaten up and run back home? That scene was also very unique. You couldn't win even with so many people. Huh, young master and I, how weak are you? It was just a moment. Ni whose face turned green. The exorcist standing beside him had more or less heard about this incident, but they did not ask about the details. Now that they heard Hellion Vivian's question, they did not know why they wanted to laugh. Ni who had never been so humiliated before. He looked at Hellion Wei furiously and said, I don't know where you came from, but I'm warning you, don't provoke me. Otherwise, I'll make sure you're not going to get away scot-free. Oh. Hellion Vivian smiled playfully, then raised her arm and said clearly, referee. There were referees in the arena. Even if it was for the sake of fairness on the surface, for referees were arranged to supervise the competition. Initially, everyone treated them as mere figureheads, but Hellion Vivian's voice attracted everyone's attention. The figurehead referees had no choice but to walk over and ask, what's wrong? Young Master Ni who of the Ni family is using the power of the Ni family to threaten the participants. How should we deal with this? Hellion Vivian's voice was not loud, but it was loud enough for everyone to hear clearly. Ni Biao was also present, but the others were standing while the leaders of the major factions were sitting on wooden chairs. They would only stand up when the competition started. Now that he heard Hellion Vivian's words, he tightened his grip on the teacup and narrowed his eyes. The referee frowned and looked at Hellion Vivian as if he was looking at a clown. He thought to himself, how stupid is this person? She actually asked me how I should deal with young Master Ni. Was there something wrong with his brain? Ni who laughed as well. He looked at Hellion Vivian as if he was watching a joke. Punish? If this young master doesn't tell you to scram, it's already good enough that you're looking for your teeth on the ground. However, Hellion Vivian was very indifferent. She continued in a lazy voice, what? Just because the Ni family was powerful, they would not be punished even if they did something wrong? That's really an eye-opener. The Ni family, who has always been known for upholding justice, is just putting on a show. In fact, they can bully people as they please. They are really good at covering the sky with one hand. After Hellion Vivian's words, the exorcists who came out of nowhere all had their own thoughts. They looked at Ni who with some guesses in their eyes. They did not know that the three major factions had joined forces to isolate the Zhuge family. They had always thought that the Ni family was the pride of the exorcists, which was why they came from the outer city. But now, the exorcists looked at each other, and all of them looked at Ni Biao. Ni Biao's face was a little gloomy. He had heard the commotion from the beginning and knew that Ni who was looking for trouble with the Zhuge family. He had never taken such things to heart, but now, his first reaction was to wonder where this brat came from. He had dug a hole for his son with just a few words. Now, he had to come out and give everyone an explanation. Otherwise, the image that the Ni family had been maintaining for a long time would be damaged. As Ni Biao, who wanted to rely on the Sorira to rule the exorcist city, at least now he had to gain everyone's complete trust to ensure that he would be able to sit on the top position in the future. Seeing that there were more and more guesses around, Ni Biao had no choice but to stand up. Master Ni. The crowd consciously made way for him. Ni Biao walked over with a smile. On the surface, he looked like an old man with a celestial temperament. Huzi, you have to apologize if you did something wrong. How many times have I told you to change that straightforward temper of yours? Ni who did not expect his father to come out to teach him a lesson. He was stunned, but no matter how much of a jerk he was, he did not dare to disobey his father's order. He turned around and glared at Hellion Vivian fiercely. He gritted his teeth and said, you, just you wait. Bailey Jiaju, whom he was pointing at, had attracted many people's attention from the moment he appeared. Now, he merely raised his eyebrows, his eyes were cold, and his thin lips curved, which made many women somewhat unable to return to their senses. After all, there were not many people who could wear an exorcist robe with a noble temperament. Especially the sense of abstinence that he emitted, it was hard to ignore. Ni Biao also noticed Beligaju's presence, and the insidious feeling in his heart intensified. Then, he looked at Hellion Vivian's languid and delicate face, and his eyes darkened. Teaching his son a lesson in front of everyone was a disgrace to the Ni family. Of course, he knew these two people, and he had asked someone to investigate them. One of them did not have any spiritual energy, but the other was very skilled, so he needed to be careful. However, they dared to embarrass him in public with just these things. They were simply courting death. Everyone said that Ni Biao was a magnanimous person, but in fact, no one was more vengeful than him. After seeing Hellion Vivian and Beligaju, his desire to make them kneel grew stronger. "Father, why did you say that to me just now?" Unlike Ni Biao, Ni who could not hide the anger in his heart. As soon as he returned to the square that belonged to the Ni family, he blurted out his irritable words. Ni Biao looked at him and said in a deep voice, "Do you think I don't want to teach those two people a lesson? What you said just now was already so obvious. If I don't show up, those exorcists will definitely question our Ni family's way of doing things. Huzi, don't be so narrow-minded. There are many ways to deal with them. In a while, they will choose the most dangerous route. By then, they will know the consequences of offending our Ni family. I don't want them to die so easily." Ni who clenched his fingers and said with a vicious expression, "Whether it is Zhuge Yun or those two people, I will make them regret provoking me." Ni Biao laughed with a hint of conspiracy, "Don't worry, I'll send 2 more exorcists to follow them. With their mediocre Taoist magic, they'll encounter the demons in the forest before they even reach the halfway mark." Chapter 727. Those two are good at catching ghosts, but they will be helpless when they encounter real demons. When the demons break their legs, the exorcists will bring them out. Not only will I let them kneel down and apologize to you alive, but I will also let everyone see how embarrassing it is for these ignorant kids to lose, Ni Biao said casually. "Father, you have a way." Ni whose anger dissipated after hearing Ni Biao's words. He was full of pride as he waited for the other party to beg for mercy. A bunch of clowns wanting to fight with him, they were asking for humiliation. Although they were far away, Madame Zhuge still felt a little scared when she saw Ni whose unfriendly gaze. She was still worried and reminded Zhuge Yun and the others again, telling them to be careful at all times. No one seemed to think that the Zhuge family would win. In terms of numbers, the Zhuge family was pathetically small. After the arrangement, the competition officially began. The first round was to see which faction of exorcists reached the entrance of the tomb first. That faction would be considered the winner. In terms of numbers, the Ni family had the highest chance of winning. This was because every group consisted of 3 people. The other 2 factions only had a maximum of 5 groups, but the Ni family had a total of 20 groups. Among these 20 groups, no matter which group reached the entrance first, the Ni family would be considered the winner. The Zhuge family was the most miserable among them. Only Hellion Vivian and her group were worthy of no one's attention. The exorcists from the Ni family did not even look at them. With such a last-minute group, it was very likely that they would die on the way to the tomb, let alone win. After all, even they could not guarantee that they would be able to reach the entrance of the tomb. The other 2 factions were also cautious, but they were mainly wary of Zhuge Yun. Even if the other 2 had extraordinary skills, when it came to the actual exorcism, what mattered was their bloodline and experience. After all, these 2 people were not from the city. They would be a burden if they went to the tomb. Of course, they also understood the situation of the Zhuge family. If it was not for the outsiders, Zhuge Yun could only choose to forfeit the competition. After all, the other children of the Zhuge family were too young and would be killed if they came, so it was better to choose the outsiders. However, this also meant that they were destined to be at the bottom. Ni who was very clear about this kind of thing. That was why he mocked Zhuge Yun before they set off. "Brother Yun, if I were you, I wouldn't think about how to win, but how to save my own life. This journey is a dead end. If anything were to happen to you, the Zhuge family would really collapse. You should mind your own business, Zhuge Yun snorted, not giving Anaihu any face. Anaihu sneered in his heart. I'll let you be arrogant for a while. Let's see how you will kneel and apologize after today. Alright, each group has received their own route. Now, set off according to your camp. The referee's voice rang out. Shaolin Yu, who was standing on Anaihu's side, glanced at Helian Weiwei and the others, then said to Anaihu, Young Master Anai, what's the point of talking to these people? Once they enter the forest, they'll probably be so scared by the demons that they won't even be able to come back. These people are only good at fooling ordinary people. Once they come to our exorcist city, they're nothing. When the time comes, they'll probably cry and beg us to save them. After hearing this, His Highness, who was always expressionless, turned his perfect lips and smiled. For some reason, that smile made Shaolin Yu feel cold from the bottom of his heart. Then, he shook his head and thought to himself, it's just a normal person with better martial qi. There's nothing to worry about. I was just thinking too much. Helian Wei also saw the smile on His Highness' face. As someone who was more familiar with His Highness' way of doing things, she silently distanced herself from Shaolin Yu, in case His Highness made a move. However, Beligaju had no intention of making a move. Instead, he glanced at her and stepped forward gracefully. Helian Vivian raised her eyebrows. Since when did he become so kind? Beligaju did not speak, but unlike the other exorcists, he walked very slowly. His whole body was filled with indifference. He held Helian Vivian's hand and played with it from time to time. There was no expression on his face, as usual, he was noble and indifferent. Among the three of them, Zhuge Yun was the most anxious. He knew that they could not win. Not to mention that the Ni family had the support of so many exorcists, just the eldest daughter of the Ni family, Ni Feng, was unbeatable. Even if they were lucky enough to defeat the other exorcists, they would not be faster than the eldest daughter of the Ni family. Moreover, even he was not sure if they could safely reach the entrance of the mausoleum. However, no matter what, he was already very grateful to the two people in front of him. If it were not for them, the Zhuge family would only be reduced to forfeiting the competition. But was he too greedy? Zhuge Yun lowered his eyes and clenched his fists. He really wanted to win. Why do you look so listless? As if she saw through Zhuge Yun's thoughts, Helian Vivian looked back and said, Don't you have confidence in us? Zhuge Yun quickly shook his head and explained, No, it's just that the other party is too strong. There are more than 30 groups, it's not a big deal. Helian Vivian spread out the map in her hand. At a glance, she knew that they were probably taken care of by someone to get the most difficult route. Not only were the bushes lush, but they also had to pass through a waterfall. They would definitely encounter many demons and strange things. Zhuge Yun did not know where she got her confidence from, but hearing her emotionless tone, he could not help but be convinced. However, he said, it's not just about the 30 groups, it's also about the eldest daughter of the Ni family. Although she did not appear, after we set off, she will definitely bring 2 people along with her. Brother Wei is also an exorcist, so you should know that in the exorcism world, the person with the most spiritual energy is most likely to be the reincarnation of the Phoenix Girl. The reincarnation of the Phoenix Girl? Helian Vivian raised her eyebrows. Didn't an eminent monk say that the Phoenix Girl would appear in the War Dragon Dynasty's Helian family? How did it become the Ni family? Zhuge Yun shook his head and said, in the beginning, it was indeed so. However, no matter how strong the people of the Helian family were, they did not have the blood of the exorcist tribe. Moreover, when the eldest daughter of the Ni family came out of seclusion this time, her spiritual energy was so abundant that even the phoenix was attracted. Furthermore, she had the same name as the previous generation's reincarnation of the Phoenix Girl, Ni Feng. Therefore, people thought that the eldest daughter of the Ni family might be the real reincarnation of the Phoenix Girl. Hellion Vivian heard this and smiled meaningfully. Didn't anyone suspect that the previous generation's reincarnation of the Phoenix Girl was fake? Maybe, the previous generation's Phoenix Girl never reincarnated. Chapter 728. Never reincarnated? Zhuge Yun stopped and looked at Hellion Vivian in disbelief. Why would Brother Wei think so? Hellion Wei curled her lips and said in a lazy voice, based on the Ni family's style, it's not impossible for them to fabricate any kind of lies in their past life in order to win the hearts of their people. Moreover, I know the Ni Feng you're talking about. You know the eldest daughter of the Ni family? Zhuge Yun was even more surprised. Her body has always been weak. She has been in seclusion for such a long time and only came out recently. How could I know her? Hellion Vivian said meaningfully, I'm saying that I know the Ni Feng of my previous life. The Ni Feng of my previous life. Zhuge Yun realized that his voice was too loud. He looked left and right and whispered, how is that possible? That was a matter of a few hundred years ago. Brother Wei, please don't make such a joke. I'm still very scared of ghosts. Hellion Vivian heard this and couldn't help but laugh. An exorcist is afraid of ghosts? Zhuge Yun didn't expect to expose his weakness. It was just that the other party's words were too outrageous, so he didn't notice it. Zhuge Yun scratched his head and blushed. When I was young, I was scared by a corpse when I went to the Ni family. I can't forget it. There are corpses in the Ni family? Hellion Vivian suddenly stopped and her eyes flashed. Zhuge Yun nodded and said, it happened a long time ago. At that time, Father was still alive. The relationship between the two families was not like now. Children like to take risks. At that time, I didn't know the difference between heaven and earth. I thought that it was amazing to know how to make Chinese talismans, but when it came to making them, it was not the case. I don't remember the details, but Brother Wei, how can you be so sure about the reincarnation of the Phoenix Girl? Because the one standing in front of you is the real reincarnation of the Phoenix Girl. Hellion Vivian didn't say this out loud. A senior monk wouldn't lie. However, she didn't have any spiritual energy in her body, so she really didn't look like the Phoenix Girl. Zhuge Yun saw that she didn't speak, so his face became serious. Actually, Father also suspected that Ni Feng wasn't the reincarnation of the Phoenix Girl. However, it was hundreds of years ago, so there was no way to prove it. Moreover, the young lady of the Ni family was very powerful. She even went to the demon world and came back unscathed. Therefore, no one believed that Lady Ni was the reincarnation of the Phoenix Girl. No one believed Father's guess. However, he once said that the exorcist tribe had an ancient book. And only when the young lady of the Ni family was to use to cast to save people. When the young lady of the Ni family, she didn't have a dharma when she was. But when the young lady of the family used did, she didn't. But when she used, to save people, to. After hearing this, some things could be confirmed. Hellion Vivian smiled, since what happened back then was fake, then the current one is even more likely to be fake. Brother Wei. Zhuge Yun said seriously, I have never mentioned this to anyone. I also hope that you can keep it a secret. Hellion Vivian nodded, don't worry, I'm not someone who would casually talk about it. I just don't know where the real Phoenix Girl is. Zhuge Yun looked at the darkening sky and let out a long sigh of melancholy. I heard from my father that it was recorded in the ancient books that the Phoenix Girl's Dharma form shines with Buddhist light and can influence all ghosts in the world. I really want to see what kind of person she is with my own eyes. Hellion Vivian lightly coughed a few times, then patted his shoulder, don't worry, you'll see. I'm just thinking about it, the Phoenix Girl is not someone I can casually meet. Zhuge Yun smiled in worship, then as if he thought of something, he said in a deep voice, although the eldest daughter of the Ni family is not the Phoenix Girl, the spiritual energy on her body cannot lie. Even if you don't want to admit it, we have to be mentally prepared. It's very possible that after working hard for an entire day and finally reaching the tomb with great difficulty, the other party has already been waiting there. Is that so? Bailey Jiaju, who had been standing at the side without saying a word, suddenly laughed. He stood at the place where the sun shone, his left hand slowly and leisurely put on a glove on his right hand. His long and narrow good-looking eyes were like gems that could emit light, indescribably elegant like jade. The corners of his mouth curved up like a hook, easily making people unable to forget him after a single glance. Zhuge Yun looked at him like that, and for some reason, he felt that there was a bit of a demonic aura, so he foolishly nodded his head. Hellion Vivian laughed. She naturally understood the meaning of a certain highness. Her voice was very clear. The competition has just begun, maybe it will be them later. I hope so. Zhuge Yun did not take Hellion Vivian's words to heart. He lowered his head and thought about how to ensure that their group could safely reach the tomb entrance. As for the rest, even if he wanted to win, he did not dare to think too much, because he had to ensure the safety of these two people. Only then would he be able to live up to his mother's instructions before he left. Unexpectedly, Hellion Vivian's words were heard by Shaolin Yu, who happened to be walking over. He laughed mockingly and said to the people behind him, "Look, what did we hear? Why don't you take a look at your own strength? It's good enough that you didn't die here, but you want to win? There should be a limit to your arrogance, you're really thick-skinned." Sure enough, the people from the other 8 teams laughed together. Originally, there would be 10 different veterans on each line. Shaolin Yu's team was undoubtedly the strongest team on this line, no matter in terms of lineup or qualifications. There were already other exorcists who were scheming in their hearts from the moment they set off. Shaolin Yu was the heir of the Shao family. His exorcism skills were definitely not bad. As long as they sucked up to him, at least they would not have to deal with the demons themselves when they appeared. As long as they could make it to the tomb entrance alive and squeeze into the top 10, they would be able to successfully enter the tomb and see the legendary Saraira of the eminent monk. Therefore, once Shaolin Yu spoke, he immediately received a response from the people around him. "Young Master Shao, don't bother about them, just let them stand here and continue to daydream. When something appears later, they will know who to kneel down and beg." The mocking laughter grew louder and louder, shaking the entire forest. Zhuge Yun clenched his fists, his face flushed red with anger. This group of people was really too much. However, Hellion Vivian's expression did not change at all, it was still indifferent. After Shaolin Yu finished speaking, he proudly led the group behind him and continued to walk forward. Zhuge Yun wanted to fight back and immediately wanted to follow, but he was stopped by Beligaju. "Don't go." Chapter 729. His voice was very light, and there was a natural and deep tone that was not found in normal people. At first, Zhuge Yun did not understand why this man wanted to stop him from moving forward. Just as he was about to ask, he heard a terrifying scream coming from the direction where the team disappeared. Ah! What followed was the overwhelming smell of blood, which suddenly spread in the air. When it rushed into the nose, it made people want to vomit. Zhuge Yun opened his eyes wide, and his first reaction was to pull out the peach-wood sword on him. However, at this time, the sound seemed to have stopped. The quiet air was filled with a kind of awe-inspiring atmosphere. Vaguely, someone seemed to be shaking the bell in his hand. Every time the bell rang, the sky became darker. There seemed to be a bunch of chilly ghosts hidden in the gradually spreading darkness. Even the surrounding temperature began to drop rapidly, and the gentle wind suddenly changed direction. There seemed to be something moving in the depths of the forest, and no one dared to go near. Zhuge Yun's forehead was full of sweat. He turned his head and was about to say, "Step back, I will protect you." The man who made him stop took a step forward. His green robes fluttered in the wind, and his long and narrow eyes narrowed slightly. He still looked lazy and charming, but there was no warmth in his eyes. With a cold and noble air that looked down on all living things, he curled his lips into a smile and said, "You can go forward now." In an instant, Zhuge Yun seemed to understand something, and his eyes shook violently. You knew that there was something in front?" Beligaju did not say anything, and just stood there with a faint smile. Zhuge Yun had no way to express the shock in his heart. Hellion Vivian, on the other hand, was very perverted. She held His Highness's hand and smiled. You deliberately let people in as bait? How could that be? Beligaju reached out and pulled her over, like an elegant gentleman. I just wanted to see how powerful they are, to make me beg you for mercy. Heh. That last chuckle was filled with a murderous aura. To put it bluntly, he wanted people to die. Hellion Vivian silently mourned for the people inside, and did not have any thoughts. Zhuge Yun, on the other hand, was unable to regain his senses for a long time. When they walked in, only 3 teams were left struggling. The rest of the people had encountered something that turned them into shriveled corpses. Moreover, their bodies were black all over. What happened? Zhuge Yun grabbed the collar of one of the exorcists. Why did so many people die? The exorcist was so frightened that he could not recover from his shock. There's something wrong with this path. I want to go back. I don't want to go to the mausoleum. I want to go back. Be quiet. The person who spoke was Shaolin Yu. He was still holding a yellow talisman in his hand, and his fingers were trembling. It's just some little things that are flying around. What are you shouting for? Young Master Shao, those aren't some small things. You've seen how big their numbers are. They just swept over and ate more than a dozen of us. There was something wrong with this path. It was too evil. Why don't we take another route after we get back? Someone suggested cautiously. Shaolin Yu did not even care about it. What a joke. He had seen that this path was the closest to the mausoleum. Although it was more dangerous, they might be able to reach it earlier. Besides, he had already set off. There was no reason for him to go back. Even if the other teams were all dead, for the sake of the Shao family's reputation, he had to go forward. Shaolin Yu thought in his heart, but his expression did not change. It's not a big deal. Take out all the yellow talismans you have and light them up. They are afraid of fire. After hearing Shaolin Yu's words, every exorcist started flipping through their yellow talismans. Hellion Vivian and Beligaju still did not move. Zhuge Yun also took out a yellow talisman. Hellion Vivian stopped him. If there are too many of them, the yellow talisman can only last for a while. It's useless. It's better to be quiet now. Then what should we do? The other exorcists panicked when they heard that. When Shaolin Yu saw that his only escape plan had been ruined, he was immediately annoyed. Are you listening to this layman or me? I lit up the yellow talisman just now, so those things didn't come near. Didn't you see? That's right. The exorcist who wanted to rely on Shaolin Yu to get out of here immediately agreed. Some people don't know anything. They can't even save themselves, yet they are still pretending to be knowledgeable. You are actually so stupid to believe them. Hurry up and take out the yellow talismans and chant the spells to light them up. Those things will come back soon. After hearing that, the exorcists quickly took out the talismans and chanted the spells. Only Zhuge Yun stopped and did not rummage through his bag. He did not know why, but the other party did not have any spiritual energy at all, but his words sounded convincing. The exorcists were all in a panic. Every group of people stood back to back. Unlike the previous time when they walked in a row, they were divided into several directions. As they moved, they cursed softly, "What the hell? It's broad daylight. Where did these things come from?" Zhuge Yun did not know what they were talking about. However, Hellion Vivian and Beligaju obviously knew. There was a familiar smile in each other's eyes. Shaolin Yu did not care what others thought. The direction he was facing was the path to the entrance of the tomb. When those things came back later, these people would act as meat shields to block them for him. They would be able to hold them off for a while. They're coming. Suddenly, an exorcist behind him shouted. They're coming again. Zhuge Yun was shocked. He turned around and saw a gust of black wind sizzling across the horizon, bringing with it an indescribable sound. Only after taking a closer look did he realize that it wasn't a black wind at all. Instead, it was countless vampire bats, flapping their wings. They were very small in size, and very quickly, they pounced on the team standing on the far left. Those people screamed and lit up the yellow talismans. But it was useless. The bigger their movements were, the crazier the bats became. With a sizzling sound, they engulfed the bodies of one of the teams. When the others saw this, they turned around and ran. Fear was like those bats that followed them like shadows. They could not get rid of them at all. Master Xiao, save. Before they could finish, 3 more people died in the blink of an eye. Xiao Lingyu was at a loss for words. He had completely miscalculated the outcome. He had thought that the remaining talismans and people would be able to buy him some time. He had not expected that there would be so many bats. Some of them would break free from his control. Chapter 730. It's useless. Yellow talismans don't work at all. The exorcists were either flustered or regretful. Although they were not the ones who died, they had almost become food for the vampire bats. Moreover, these bats could not be shaken off at all. It was as if the bats were toying with them. They did not kill them immediately, but attacked them again and again. It was as if the bats were tasting the fear they felt before they died. What should we do? Someone began to tug at Xiao Lingyu's arm. Young Master Xiao, we took out the yellow talismans because we listened to you. Now, even the yellow talismans are gone, and we can't deal with those bats. What should we do? What should we do? Xiao Lingyu flung that person away, and the purple jade bell in his hand fell. His face was full of hatred. How would I know what to do? Those bats clearly did not bite me. If you want to blame someone, blame yourselves. Look at yourselves and see if the yellow talismans were wrong. It must be so. As long as he tried again, he would be able to use this opportunity to escape. However, what he did not expect was to hear a lazy laugh. Don't worry. This time, those vampire bats will bite you. Hearing this, Xiao Lingyu suddenly looked at Hellion Vivian. Because he was uncertain, his face was pale. What do you mean? Bells. Hellion Vivian's voice was very calm, and even her expression was somewhat indifferent. The purple jade bell you were wearing fell. If I'm not wrong, that string of bells should have been consecrated in the temple. Those vampire bats did not suck your blood because of this string of bells, and not because of the yellow talismans in your hand. Furthermore, vampire bats rely on sound to locate their direction, but you just had to chant the incantation loudly. Hee, young Master Xiao, it seems that your family's exorcism skills are not up to par. You don't even know this little bit of common sense. When the other party mentioned that the bells on his body had been consecrated, Xiao Lingyu's eyes had already started to waver. Now that he heard the last part, he subconsciously looked at the string of purple jade bells at his feet. The fragments on the ground could no longer be seen, which meant that this string of bells could no longer be used. Xiao Lingyu had never regretted anything as much as he did now. His fingers clutched the shards, and his eyes turned red. Like everyone else, he was afraid of the next vampire bat. If it was said that people did not believe Hellion Wei Wei at first, after listening to Hellion Wei Wei's words, they finally realized that the other party was not someone who did not know the ropes, but a genuine expert. The exorcists seemed to have seen the hope of survival. They all walked towards Hellion Vivian. The exorcist, who had been disdainful just now, was now humble. He even spoke carefully. Even Xiao Lingyu stood up from the ground in a panic. She looked at Hellion Vivian and said, "Then tell me, what should we do to lose those vampire bats?" At this time, Xiao Lingyu was no longer as arrogant as before. Even his tone was anxious, and he appeared to be in a difficult situation. He was still unwilling in his heart. After all, he had never given in to anyone before. However, in order to survive, this was the only way. Hellion Vivian glanced at him and said slowly, "Why should I tell you? Young Master Xiao, don't forget that you asked us to kneel and beg for mercy before you left." Xiao Lingyu looked at the gazes all around him and felt a burning pain on his face. However, at this time, he had no choice but to lower his head and say, "I spoke too quickly and said the wrong thing." Hellion Vivian smiled and said, "Young Master Xiao, are you begging us now?" "Yes." Xiao Lingyu clenched his fists, and the smile on his face stiffened. He thought that he had done what he had to do. However, the man standing in front of him only said a few words slowly, "We don't accept." Xiao Lingyu suddenly raised his head and looked in the direction of Beligaju. He still had that evil smile on his face. It was the same smile he had seen before he left. His thin lips were slightly curved, and he looked like a demon walking out of the night. All of this gave Xiao Lingyu a feeling. It was as if everything that was happening now was revenge for what he had said before. Before they left, he had said that he would make these two cry and beg him. After they left, it had only been an incense stick's worth of time before the incident happened. However, the person who was begging had become him. There was nothing more humiliating than such a thing. At that time, these people had also spoken up for him. However, it was not the same situation now. When Xiao Lingyu thought about it, he wished that he could dig a hole and bury himself in it. He had tasted the taste of his own medicine. However, the fear in his heart made him unable to care about these things. He was busy calculating, and saw that the next wave of vampire bats was about to arrive. Xiao Lingyu no longer regarded Xiao as a young master. He reached out and tugged at Zhuge Yun's long sleeve. Even his voice was trembling, "Brother Yun, we were playmates who grew up together. When we were young, we said that we would not leave anyone in the lurch. I beg you, I was immature in the past and often made fun of you. I won't do that again in the future. Please ask them to save me, Brother Yun." Zhuge Yun knew that kneeling down and begging for help would have been impossible for the Xiao Lingyu of the past. After all, this person was used to being arrogant, just like Hu. However, he was different from Hu. Although he would mock and ridicule him, he had never openly bullied the Zhuge family. As an exorcist, he was most particular about right and wrong. Since the other party did not cross the line, he could not leave him in the lurch. Zhuge Yun turned his head and gave a fist salute to Hellion Vivian and Beligaju. "My two benefactors, if you have a solution, please tell them." His Highness' solution did not need to be explained. All he had to do was to stand there and release a trace of his aura, and all the vampire bats would retreat 3 feet away. The bigger fetus in Hellion Vivian's stomach thought so too. When it heard the commotion outside, it curled its lips arrogantly. These humans are too useless. They are even afraid of bats. They suck blood and killed a few people just now. Humans are different from us. They are afraid of these things. The smaller fetus analyzed in a weak voice. The bigger fetus's blood-red eyes were filled with mockery. What a cowardly race. The smaller fetus felt that he had to remind him. "Brother, Mother is also a human. Mother is different." The bigger fetus immediately said, "You and Mother are different from others." The smaller fetus nodded. "Mother will have a solution." "Yes, unlike Father who only knows how to suppress with force." The bigger fetus was very disdainful when it said this. The smaller fetus silently moved its transparent little hand and thought to himself, "Actually, your main purpose of speaking is to mock Father." Chapter 731. It was as if he had sensed something. The tall and slender Beligaju lowered his eyes and slowly glanced at Hellion Vivian's belly. Zhuge Yun knew that he would not be able to find a breakthrough from him. He looked at Hellion Vivian and said, "Brother Wei." Hellion Vivian still had to give Zhuge Yun some face, even though she was not a good person. The bats use sound to locate their location. As long as we use sound to disrupt their direction, we can escape. Disrupt sound? Everyone looked at each other and still did not understand. Helly and Vivian reached out and grabbed the bell hanging on Zhuge Yun's back. Use this. Each of you has one. Tie them together and hang them on the branches. The wind is blowing in the west, so our direction is east. Bells were something that every exorcist had. They were mostly used to summon spirits and exorcise evil spirits. Sometimes, when they encountered zombies, they could use them together with yellow talismans to restrict their movements. They had thought of using bells to deal with zombies, but they had never thought of using bells to deal with bats. Wait a minute. What if this method doesn't work? Some people were still skeptical. Helly and Vivian sneered. You don't have to try. I'll try. At this point, there was no time to think too much. Survival was more important. The exorcists untied all the bells and used the demon-binding red rope as the lead, tying them all on the branches. We'll go in the opposite direction. In the midst of the chaos, Helly and Vivian's voice was still very calm. One of you will pull the red rope. When you see the bats, shake the bell. Okay. Okay. Shaolin Yu said while nodding. Now that he had decided on Helly and Vivian, he would do whatever she said. He was just short of calling Helly and Vivian boss. Helly and Vivian looked behind her again. When you're ready, we'll go. At her command, all the exorcists began to move in the direction of the entrance of the tomb. Zhuge Yun was in charge of holding the rope. The young man seriously looked back as he walked, waiting for the bat to appear so that he could shake the bell. The red rope was long enough for the bats to fly in the opposite direction. They're here. They're here again. Some of the exorcists shouted. Helly and Vivian glanced at him and said, Don't make a sound. Keep walking. That person immediately shut his mouth and watched as the black whirlwind rolled over from not far away. Zhuge Yun shook the bell at the right time. The ringing sound completely disrupted the bats' judgment. Their bodies paused in the air for a moment, then suddenly turned around and pounced in the direction of the ringing bell. When the exorcists saw that this method was effective, their eyes lit up. Zhuge Yun did not stop moving. As long as the bell kept ringing, the bats would keep circling around that place. And they could take advantage of this time to take a detour. However, what puzzled Zhuge Yun was that Beligaju, who was standing behind him, was walking very leisurely, as if he was not afraid of those vampire bats. Especially when the vampire bats flew behind him, it was as if they were nothing more than foils for this man. Of course, Helly and Vivian knew why His Highness was walking so slowly. In the demon world, these vampire bats were usually as common as pigeons. They were used to send messages to His Highness. Who would run away when they saw their own carrier pigeons? On the contrary, once His Highness revealed a trace of his aura, these vampire bats would all fall from the sky in fright and kneel down to worship him. Helly and Vivian did not doubt His Highness's bad taste at all. She turned her head and whispered in his ear, They didn't attack all at once. Instead, they split into groups. Don't tell me you did something to them? Beligaju raised his eyebrows elegantly and said in a matter-of-fact tone, Of course, we have to eat time after time, right? Helly and Vivian. So the attack just now was just a form of table etiquette to His Highness. The world of demons is too subtle. Mortals like us don't understand. Also. Beligaju's thin lips curled up. It's more interesting to eat like this. The panic on the face of prey when they're about to die is very interesting. On this point, the bigger fetus agreed with his father's point of view. For once, he didn't mock His Highness. Instead, he moved his body a little and opened his eyes, which glowed red. He looked at the smaller fetus seriously and said, When Big Brother gets out of here, I'll catch some bats for you to play with. The two little ones continued to communicate in their mysterious language. Helly and Vivian also noticed the noise in her stomach. She chuckled softly and said to Beligaju in a voice that only the two of them could hear, The baby seems to be unusually lively today. Beligaju didn't comment. He directly took Helly and Vivian's hand away from her stomach and said in a calm voice, Don't think about him all the time in the future. We're in a competition. What if we lose? Hellion Vivian. With His Highness around, how could we lose? You're pretending again. The bigger fetus snorted coldly. You're obviously jealous of us. The smaller fetus was also used to the communication between his big brother and his father. In any case, they just didn't like each other and always wanted to fight for more favor from their mother. However, it was strange that their father couldn't sense their existence. They were clearly formed together. The smaller fetus didn't have the energy to think too much. Ever since they entered the exorcist city, he obviously felt tired. No matter what, his mother had put in a lot of effort to grow delicious strawberries for him. He had to go out with his big brother. Tired? The bigger fetus looked at the smaller fetus. He moved his little hand and patted the smaller fetus' head. Go to sleep. Big brother will accompany you. The two little ones were still very loving. The bigger one always took care of the smaller one. The exorcists passed through the forest and welcomed the sunlight. In this place, vampire bats couldn't come. At this moment, young Master Zhao's gaze towards Hellion Vivian had completely changed. It was full of admiration. In fact, no matter how much of a jerk young Master Zhao was, how much of a coward he liked to mock others, and how much of a coward he was, he still had a heroic side in his heart. After all, they were both exorcists. Since they were young, they had a desire to kill demons. Now that he had seen Hellion Vivian's abilities, young Master Zhao pushed Zhuge Yun to the side and said to Hellion Vivian in a very heroic manner, "Brother, are you willing to join our Zhao family? If you join our Zhao family, I can give you 10 times the price in the Zhuge family." Young Master Zhao thought that the other party would definitely not reject such an offer. This was the only way to guarantee his victory. Otherwise, the winner would most likely be Zhuge Yun. How could he let that blockhead take advantage of him? Chapter 732. The rules of the competition did mention that the foreign exorcists could change teams after arriving at the entrance of the tomb according to the performance of the major factions. However, under normal circumstances, these exorcists would not change their positions. Firstly, some factions would poach people from the outside, and they had already agreed on the price. Secondly, the exorcists would also have their own thoughts about the exorcists. After all, only by following the Ni family would they have a chance to reach the final step. Therefore, no one took this rule seriously. But now, young Master Zhao actually sent out an invitation in advance without even seeing the shadow of the tomb. All the exorcists looked at Hellion Vivian, and their eyes flashed with deep shock. However, thinking about it carefully, young Master Zhao's actions were understandable. After all, this person knew too much. Although they could not sense the spiritual energy, with such a person following them into the tomb, it would definitely be more efficient. The most impressive thing about her was her calm and unruffled attitude in giving orders. It was as if she could solve any problem as soon as it was in her hands. The exorcists on the Zhao family's side naturally hoped that Hellion Vivian would join them. The other exorcists also felt that there was no suspense in this matter. Regardless of whether it was in terms of numbers or power, the Zhao family was stronger than the Zhuge family. Moreover, 10 times the price was not a small amount. They believed that no one would reject such a good offer. Zhuge Yun's eyes also dimmed, but he did not say anything. Until now, his two benefactors had helped him enough. Even if they really went to the Zhao family, he would only feel grateful in his heart. However, what was unexpected was that Hellion Wei smiled evilly. "Young Master Zhao, if you bring your team to the Zhuge family, I can give you 20 times the price." When eldest young Master Zhao heard this, he was stunned for a moment. Then, he looked at Hellion Wei's expression and admired her even more. "Brother, you really have the demeanor of a hero. You treat money as nothing. I admire you." Hellion Vivian was almost certain now that this young Master Zhao was a Chinibu. The more rude you were to him, the more he would think that you were awesome. This kind of person was still young, and his thinking was different from ordinary people. She could understand. However, Hellion Vivian also saw that in order to escape, young Master Xiao had come up with a scheme to harm others, which was not desirable. Just because of this, Hellion Vivian didn't want to say anything more to him. She only turned her head and said to Zhuge Yun, "Young Master Yun, let's go to the left." Her voice was very normal, with an unchanging clarity. Zhuge Yun was a little stunned. He was already prepared for the two benefactors to choose the Xiao family, but who would have thought, seeing that Zhuge Yun didn't move, young Master Xiao strode forward and followed. "Wait a moment, brother, I'll go with you." There were originally 10 teams, but now there were less than 3 teams left. Every one of them worshipped Hellion Vivian as an expert. Whatever path Hellion Vivian chose, they would naturally follow. But as they walked, they realized that the 3 people in front of them had disappeared. Zhuge Yun didn't know how he walked so fast. He was completely following Beligaju. When he realized it, he had already shaken off the tail behind him. The 2 figures standing on the branches narrowed their eyes at the scene. Their eyes darkened. "Old Su, did you see that?" "I saw it." The other person sneered and stroked his white beard. "These 2 foreign exorcists are smart, but in front of the Ni family, it's just a small trick. Let's wait a little longer. After this area, we'll reach the Zonghai waterfall. The things sleeping there won't be as easy to deal with as these bats. When the time comes, we'll distance ourselves from them and let them know what's good for us. Then, we'll strike. Old Master has instructed us to make them embarrassed." Of course, I remember what Old Master said. They dared to embarrass the Ni family in front of so many people. These people are really tired of living. It turned out that these 2 figures were not strangers. They were the exorcists that Ni Biao had sent before the team set off. They were very old, and their spiritual aura was very strong. They bent over and looked at the 3 people walking on the ground as if they were looking at ants before death. Their eyes were filled with contempt. However, they didn't expect that. Their whereabouts had long been noticed by someone. Zhuge Yun was still walking forward with a serious face when he saw Bailey Jia Ju by his side suddenly stop in his tracks. The side of his face that was as perfect as an ice sculpture slowly curved into an arc. It was so evil that it made people's hearts beat faster. What's wrong? Zhuge Yun didn't know why, but when he saw the man smile, he felt a chill down his spine. Even though the other party didn't say much, he felt a chill down his spine. Hellion Vivian also turned her head and raised her eyebrows at Beligaju. She still had a strawberry in her mouth. Beligaju looked at her and reached out to touch her head. His voice was noble. "There are 2 little mice that have not been dealt with yet. Eat some strawberries first, I'll be back soon." 2 little mice? Based on Hellion Vivian's understanding of His Highness, these 2 little mice must be someone. Go ahead. Anyway, she didn't have any spiritual aura now. She could just leave the killing to His Highness. Hellion Vivian would never waste her energy, especially when she was pregnant. Zhuge Yun was still worried. Is it really okay to let Brother Ju go alone? Would there be any danger in it? As soon as he finished speaking, the sound of trees falling could be heard. The sudden breaking of the trees made the 2 people on the tree almost fall. Fortunately, they had the spiritual aura to help them. They panicked a few times and steadied themselves. What's going on? The person called Elder Su's face darkened. Who's down there? However, there was no response from the forest. The sound of the wind was particularly harsh at this moment. Unable to get a response, Elder Su went down the tree in exasperation. He saw his companion standing under the tree, motionless. "Elder Lu, did you see how the tree broke?" Elder Su continued to ask. However, Elder Lu's exorcist did not respond to his question. Elder Su finally realized that something was wrong. He turned his head and saw a black figure standing quietly not far away. The leaves of the tree shrouded his body with a layer of shadow, but it did not hide the person's noble and handsome face. "It's you." Elder Su was on guard, but he still did not take the other party seriously. He turned around and wanted to mock him. Elder Lu, did you see that? That kid who's still wet behind the ears is looking for trouble. However, for some reason, the exorcist called Elder Lu pressed on his shoulder in pain. Chapter 733. What's wrong? Old Su looked at his partner in confusion. In the next moment, the body in front of him suddenly exploded. Hot blood splattered everywhere and squeezed onto his face. An unprecedented fear was like an invisible hand that firmly grasped Old Su's heart. He had never experienced such a sense of oppression before. So much so that his first reaction was regret. He could not even see the specific movements of the figure clearly. Other than the black feathers that symbolized the evil aura, everything else was so fast that it was dazzling. You're not human, you're evil. The title faintly appeared in his mouth, but before he could shout it out, a swarm of vampire bats flew over from behind him. Every bat seemed to be obeying the orders of the figure. They swept over like a black wind and penetrated Old Su's body. The slender figure slowly retreated when this happened. There was a faint smile at the corner of his mouth as he whispered softly, I hate it when people call me a demon, even though I really am one. Bailey Jia Ju's heels landed on the ground, and the black feathers also quietly stopped. Then, he took 2 steps forward and looked at the bloodstains on his hands. His movements were graceful as he stopped. Then, he took off his gloves and threw them on Old Su, who had already died a long time ago. The vampire bats got up and surrounded him one by one. However, none of them dared to approach him. Instead, they excitedly supported him. Beligaju stood in the middle of a group of vampire bats. His deep eyes were as dark as ink. The fluttering fur cloak swept up his waist-length hair. Coupled with the dim light, the evil aura of nobility rushed over. All right, you can all go back. Beligaju wiped his hands with a white handkerchief. His tone was as casual as usual. The vampire bats scattered in groups and landed on the ground one by one. They looked like they were kowtowing. Zhuge Yun did not know this was the situation. When he heard the commotion, he anxiously wanted to save someone. But before he could take a step forward, he saw that Bailey Jia had already walked back unscathed. His face was still so handsome that it was suffocating. His body was also clean, as if he had only gone to the back to wash his hands. They were too dirty, so it took a bit of time to deal with them. Beligaju smiled in an elegant manner. Now, we can move on. Zhuge Yun's eyes widened when he heard that. How could this man say that so casually? Don't you see the vampire bats flying overhead? Zhuge Yun lowered his voice, afraid that he would attract the attention of the vampire bats if he was too loud. Beligaju calmly tidied up his sleeves. I didn't see anything. How is that possible? Zhuge Yun turned around and said to Hellion Vivian, they just flew past here, right? Brother Wei. Hellion Vivian played with the strawberry in her hand and smiled. Really? Why didn't I see it? Ah. Zhuge Yun was dumbfounded and rubbed his eyes. Was he hallucinating just now? But there was clearly a group of vampire bats flying past here. Hellion Vivian did not look at the frowning youth again. Instead, she looked at Beligaju. Did you clean it up? Bailey Jia Ju faintly hummed in agreement and pulled her over. The two of them basically had a tacit understanding. Hellion Vivian touched the bridge of her nose and moved her finger on the map. The smell of blood is a bit strong. After being pregnant, her sense of smell was very sensitive in this aspect. Beligaju looked at her helpless expression and a trace of gentleness flashed through his eyes. Then, he kissed her head and said in a rather annoyed voice, there is no place to wash it. There are trees nearby, but I cleaned it up. The smell will fade in a while. Hellion Vivian was speechless. She was just saying it, but it poked at a certain prince's sore spot. It seems that a certain prince's misophobia was acting up again. However, how did he kill someone? With such a strong smell of blood, only Zhuge Yun, that upright youth, could not smell it. In fact, Other than the smell of blood, there was also the familiar mint sandalwood scent on the man's body. When mixed together, Helene Vivian did not feel that the smell was bad. She leaned over and kissed him back. Baligaju's eyes darkened. He suddenly felt that Zhuge Yun, who was following behind him, was a hindrance. Zhuge Yun did not realize that he had become a third wheel. His mind was full of the things that happened when he was hallucinating. In the end, he could not figure it out. He shook his head and rushed to the front. After going through the forest, it is the only waterfall on this mountain. My father said that there is a demon sleeping there. When we go there, it is best not to wake it up. Okay. Helene Vivian replied straightforwardly. But when she really got there, she still chose the shortest route to take. Zhuge Yun's heart suddenly became nervous again. He was constantly on guard against the appearance of the demon. As they walked up the waterfall, he did not let go of the yellow talisman. However, he did not know that when he lowered his head to take the yellow talisman, that demon had already come face to face with His Highness. It turned out that the demon had already smelled the scent of humans. It circled its long thorny tail and lurked on the water, waiting for someone to walk into its trap. It wanted to eat the pregnant woman. Humans might be affected by the disguise and lose their judgment. But it would not. It could tell at a glance that among the three people, one was a woman dressed as a man. And that woman was pregnant. It could even smell the scent of the fetus. It was extremely fragrant. It was really the best in the world. Very few people could smell as much spiritual energy as the fetus that it smelled this time. It should be because his parents were exorcists that they were able to create such a treasure. The more the demon wanted to eat, the faster its saliva flowed. It could barely suppress its appetite and quickly swam over with its long tail. But what it did not expect was that as soon as it appeared, it met with a pair of deep and evil eyes. Those eyes were as black as the night, but when it appeared, there was a flash of golden light. That was King. The demon's voice was almost trembling. Fang, who was originally excited, shrank back because of the man's appearance. His body was trembling, afraid that the man would be unhappy and pick up all of his demon scriptures. Scram. One word. The demon swam faster than the fish in the water. It did not even dare to look back. Zhuge Yun was still on guard. How could he know that a certain prince just brushed his face and solved the danger? At this time, the father and son of the Ni family heard the noise and thought that their plan had succeeded. They smiled proudly. Chapter 734. Father. Ni who quickly walked to Ni Biao's side and said in a low voice, "It seems that the magical creatures at the waterfall are making their move." Ni Biao did not look surprised. He sneered, "This is just a small lesson. Your Uncle Su and the rest should have already taken action. When the 2 or 3 people break their limbs, they will carry them to the entrance of the tomb. There will be people there who will laugh at them." Ni who nodded. The smile on his face was more arrogant than ever. The other exorcists saw this and came over to ask, "Young Master Ni, what's the good news?" Before we set off, there was a boastful person from the Zhuge family who said that he would win against us. Now it seems that even if we wait for them at the entrance of the tomb for 3 hours, they will not be able to arrive. Ni who did not reveal their plan. He pointed to the path that led to the entrance of the tomb after crossing another hill. His posture was full of pride. The people around him laughed. "That team from the Zhuge family wants to win? Isn't that like hitting a rock with an egg?" That's right. Of all the people they could provoke, they just had to provoke young Master and I. In my opinion, young Master and I can't be bothered to argue with them. Otherwise, they would not be able to live peacefully. There's no need to be so calculative when there's such a huge difference in strength. It's just that this foreign exorcist is too good at bragging. Forget about young Master and I, just think about young lady and I. Who can win against her? Even if all the teams on our route are here, we won't be able to see them. Maybe they won't even survive. Such a team should just be left to fend for themselves. They are really overestimating themselves. Ni, who listened to the discussions around him. His inflated vanity was even more agitated. He really could not wait to reach the entrance of the tomb and see how the three of them looked after losing blood. "How is it, father? Is there any news from Uncle Sue and the rest?" Ni, who turned his head and asked in a low voice. Ni Biao listened to the sound and smiled confidently. "The sound is gone now. It should be your two uncles who lured the magical creatures away and dragged Zhuge Yun and the rest out. Let's continue forward and wait at the entrance of the tomb." "All right." Ni, whose favorite pastime was to see people regretting their actions. Initially, he had only intended to break Zhuge Yun's arm and call it a day. However, the two amateurs had repeatedly acted recklessly. Hence, they could not blame him for being merciless. It was undeniable that the Ni family's father and son team had the least casualties. Out of the 10 teams that had set out, 7 of them had survived. Moreover, when they were climbing up the mountain, they did not see any other teams following them. This made the father and son of the Ni family even more convinced that they had won. By the time they reached the gathering point at the entrance of the tomb, it was already dusk. Someone exclaimed, "Look! The red flag! Someone has arrived. Who could be so fast?" The exorcists looked at each other. Only Ni, who was arrogant. Who else could it be? "Of course, it's my elder sister. You must have not met my elder sister yet. You can meet her later." When the crowd heard this, they could not help but say in admiration, as expected of the Phoenix girl. "With such speed, even if we cultivate for another 10 years, we still won't be able to match it. Look at the ashes, the other party is more than 6 hours ahead of us. The young lady of the Ni family is really amazing. I didn't believe in the Phoenix girl before, but now that I've seen it, I think it's true." "Shoo, don't say this in front of the Ni family. Be careful not to offend them. I think the Zhuge family is done for. Zhuge Yun is still young after all. Some things are more difficult for him to do." Who asked him to make things difficult for them? The strength of the Ni family is obvious to all. Even the young lady of the Ni family is very kind. However, he insisted that the Ni family had ulterior motives and that the Saraira could not be taken. Let's see when he can come up later. Who knows, he might have died on the way. The crowd shook their heads and continued to walk forward. Before they reached the entrance of the tomb, their breath was taken away by a fairy-like figure. The woman did not wear a green robe like the others. Instead, she wore a white fur robe. A hooded cloak was placed on her head, making her appear even more ethereal. Even with the white veil on her face, it was difficult to conceal the sickly beauty that faintly seeped out. Before they could get close, they heard her coughing a few times. She was so weak that they almost suspected that she was seriously ill. They could not help but want to take care of her. The person standing behind her seemed to be her follower. He had a very ordinary appearance, but his eyes were like ancient wells, giving off a jade-like temperament. The follower passed the heater to the woman and said in a very gentle voice, "Young lady, take care of your body." Perhaps the young lady of the Ni family was too approachable, or perhaps she was too kind in her heart. She even treated the follower very gently. "Thank you." The follower smiled and returned to stand behind an iPhone. The exorcists had heard about the beauty of the young lady of the Ni family, but they had never seen her before. Now that they had seen her, they could not bear to disturb her peace. It was said that the reincarnation of the Phoenix girl was bound to be related to Buddha and had some resemblance to a bodhisattva. From their point of view, the young lady of the Ni family's temperament was already qualified, not to mention the spiritual energy that lingered around her. Every exorcist felt that they had seen a real fairy, and the admiration in their hearts grew even stronger. Ni, whose face was full of pride, everyone has seen it. This is my sister, the real reincarnation of the Phoenix girl. Huzi, don't be so ostentatious. Ni Feng coughed twice softly with a decent smile on her face. Although she said that, she did not deny that she was not the Phoenix girl. The exorcists did not believe it at first, but now that they had seen Feng, all the doubts in their hearts were cast away. If she was not the reincarnation of the Phoenix girl, such a weak woman could not have arrived so much earlier than them. She must be the Phoenix girl. The exorcists did not think that the red flag was put up by someone else. There was only worship in their hearts. Looking at this scene, Biao stroked his beard and nodded satisfactorily. Now, all that was left was for old Su and the rest to carry the 3 disabled people to apologize to the Ni family. Then, everything would be perfect. Chapter 735. Zhuge Yun could not be left alive. However, he could not be allowed to die. Zhuge Yun had doubted the Ni family in front of everyone. If he died in the blink of an eye, people would definitely doubt the Ni family. Now, he had to ask someone to save Zhuge Yun's life in front of everyone. As for how to torture him after he was saved, that was a matter for later. Anyway, he should be unable to move now and would not hinder his plan anymore. Keeping him alive would not only prove to the world that the Ni family did not have any evil intentions, but it would also win the hearts of countless people. At the same time, it would also tell the Zhuge family that they could not afford to offend the Ni family and that they better behave themselves in the future. Ni who was not as good at hiding as Ni Biao. He had an expression that said, "Our family has already won," on his face. He looked behind him in disdain and said, "We are all here, but Zhuge Yun and the rest are not here yet. Who knows when they will be here? Don't make us wait until tomorrow. I don't have that kind of patience. In my opinion, we should enter the cemetery first." "How long do we have to wait for them?" someone suggested. Ni Biao shook his head hypocritically like a kind senior and said, "It is not easy for anyone to get here, not to mention that Zhuge Yun is the only son left in the Zhuge family. The sky is not dark yet, so it's okay to wait for them." No one had ever dared to embarrass him like those brats did. He had to get back his face. Others did not understand Ni Biao's thoughts, but as his son, Ni who, of course understood. He laughed arrogantly and said, "Listen to my father, wait for them. Old Master Ni and young Master Ni are really righteous." Someone gave a thumbs up and praised, "Zhuge Yun is so suspicious of the Ni family, but old Master Ni still advised us to wait for him. Anyway, we won't win even if we wait. There are already 12 teams here. 2 of them were automatically eliminated, so they will be last even if they come." As the exorcists were talking, they saw a figure walking up from the bottom of the mountain. That figure was none other than Zhuge Yun. However, they did not know why he was so leisurely and elegant. He even caught 3 fish with the peachwood sword in his hand. "Hey, young Master Yun is finally here." Although the disciples of the Ni family called him young Master Yun, they were actually mocking him. "Where are your 2 partners? Could it be that they died on the way here and couldn't come up with you? You'll know what's going on if you see it. But young Master Yun, you're really slow. We've been up here for a while, but you've only just shown your face. Last place, you can only be eliminated." The Ni family laughed out loud as they spoke, but no one stopped them. Ni who was also puzzled as to why Zhuge Yun would come up alone. According to the plan, his 2 uncles should be the ones to carry the 3 people who were missing their arms and legs. Why were his 2 uncles not here? Perhaps it was because they were separated midway, but when Ni who saw Zhuge Yun's disheveled look, he was certain of his guess. He walked towards Zhuge Yun arrogantly and said, "Brother Yun, don't be too rash. Do as you can. What's the use of saying such nice words? Don't you agree? In the end, you are the one who will lose face. TSK, why do you have to make it so unbearable?" He had even sacrificed his partner's life, but he still couldn't obtain the right to enter the tomb. Those 2 amateurs are even more ridiculous. How dare they threaten to win against our Ni family? They really overestimate themselves. Zhuge Yun frowned and wanted to say something. However, Ni did not care at all. Instead, he turned around and asked Feng, "Big sister, you should tell him when you planted the red flag on the road. It's good to let this person know the distance between him and the Ni family." "Red flag?" Feng coughed softly. Her delicate face was covered by a white veil. She asked in confusion, "What red flag?" Ni was stunned. "The red flag on the mountainside? Didn't you put it there?" "No." Feng did not notice the problem. Due to her physical condition, she set off on her own and did not form a group with the others. Hence, she did not understand that before they set off, the referee explained to each team the function of the red flag in their hands and asked them to plant the red flag when they arrived at the assembly point. Ni was even more dumbfounded. He asked again, "Didn't you arrive earlier?" "Yes, more than 2 hours earlier than you." Feng, who did not know the rules, did not realize that someone had arrived earlier than her. After hearing her words, Ni was even more confused. "You mean you only arrived earlier than us by more than 2 hours?" The other exorcists looked over in confusion. "That's not right. Look at the burnt ashes. The red flag should have been put up more than 6 hours ago. Could it be that someone arrived earlier than Big Sister?" Someone shouted in disbelief. Ni immediately retorted, "How is that possible? Young Master Ni, didn't you see it too? The burnt ashes are obviously more than 2 hours ago." The exorcists looked at each other. If the first person to arrive wasn't Miss Ni, who could it be? Yes, who could it be? Who could be faster than Miss Ni? No one could figure it out. At this time, the expressions of the Ni family's father and son had turned sour. Ni tried to find an excuse. "No matter what, all the teams are here. If someone really arrived earlier than my big sister, why aren't they here?" "Who said we weren't here?" A lazy voice drifted from the entrance of the tomb in the distance. Gradually, 2 people walked out from the shadows. Beligaju still exuded an ascetic beauty with his untainted coldness. On the other hand, Hellion Vivian looked like she had just woken up. She yawned in a green shirt and white shirt, looking handsome and charming. "We came too early. We just found a place to sleep and heard young Master Ni ridiculing us. What a great show." The expressions of the Ni family's father and son changed when they saw the 2 people's faces. Now that they heard Hellion Vivian's words, their eyes shook violently. How was that possible? How could these 2 people be standing here unscathed? Ni clenched his hands. Where were his 2 uncles? And, what did this person say? They were already here? Ni growled and sneered at Hellion Vivian, "That's impossible. Even if you're early, you can't be the first to arrive. Nothing is impossible. I was the one who put up the red flag." Zhuge Yun, who was holding a peachwood sword, stood in front of Ni and blocked him. Ni snorted in amusement after hearing that. "Brother Yun, you must have heard my big sister say that she didn't put up the red flag. That's why you said that you put it up yourself. You must be dreaming." Chapter 736. "I didn't," Zhuge Yun could not help but blurt out. Even his brows were furrowed. Ni continued to ask, "You didn't? Everyone saw it. You only arrived after we did. How could you be the one who put up the red flag? Brother Yun's words might be able to fool others, but they can't fool us. I did arrive early, but because we waited for too long, I was afraid that Brother Wei would be hungry, so I went to catch some fish." Zhuge Yun hurriedly explained. He did not expect that he would provoke Ni's attack when he only went to catch some fish. Ni Biao was different from Ni Hu. The experienced and astute him knew that the red flag was most likely put up by Zhuge Yun. However, it was precisely because he knew that he could not give up on the attack now. They had spread the word long ago, and the people around them had already predicted that the Ni family would win. If Zhuge Yun and his team were to reverse the result now, what would happen to the Ni family's reputation? Even if they had to think of a way, they could not let Zhuge Yun and his team win. Ni Biao thought to himself, and the first thing he said was, "Nephew, we are not unreasonable people. You said that you put up the red flag, but it was only because you wanted to catch some fish. In fact, who can prove that the red flag was put up by your team? Or if anyone saw it, then it's your win." Ni Biao was very polite and his tone was peaceful, but in fact, what he meant was that this matter did not count as long as no one witnessed it. Zhuge Yun did not expect Ni Biao, as a senior, to be so shameless. He clenched his fists angrily. "When we came, there was no one around except for the three of us. Who could have seen it? Then there's no other way." Ni Biao looked regretful. "Nephew, it's not that I'm being arbitrary, but you said that no one saw it, and you came from behind. It's hard to say." Zhuge Yun never knew that Ni Biao was such a person. Perhaps his memory was still stuck in his childhood, or perhaps Ni Biao had never shown his true colors. In fact, if he thought about it carefully, how could Ni Biao not know that Ni who dared to bully the Zhuge family? What uncle? He was just trying to use his status to talk. Zhuge Yun's eyes were bloodshot, but the exorcists beside him were still skeptical of him. It was not for any other reason, but because Ni Biao had spoken, they had to consider what was going on. When Ni Hu saw the situation, he became even more arrogant. He turned around and said to Zhuge Yun, "Take a good look at your team. Do you think that you, an intermediate exorcist, and two outsiders can outrun my elder sister's speed? Brother Yun, can I trouble you to tell a better lie? Do you think all of us are idiots?" After hearing Ni Hu's words, the exorcists looked at Zhuge Yun with even more suspicion. Zhuge Yun had never tasted such inexplicable politeness before. He really did not expect the Ni family to be so shameless. His fair face turned red from anger. Of course, Ni Feng knew what was going on, but she didn't intervene. She just stood aside silently as if she agreed with Ni Hu's words. The attendant standing behind her lowered his eyes. No one knew what he was thinking. Under his long sleeves, his slender fingers moved, filling the air with the smell of herbs. It seemed that since Helly and Vivian and the rest appeared, this attendant had been unusually quiet. No one would notice him, but when he lowered his eyes, it was obvious that he did not agree with the Ni family's actions. "Brother Yun, it's okay if you can't win, but you can't lie. How can you be so vain?" Seeing that Zhuge Yun was speechless, Ni Hu became more and more insatiable. Who could prove that the flag was planted by Zhuge Yun's team? As long as there was no concrete evidence, the Ni family would still win. Although he did not see the three people's miserable state of having their arms and legs broken, as long as he could give them a harsh slap in the face, it would be worth it. It's just that he didn't know that while he was saying these words, Wei Wei was looking at him with a smile, yet not a smile from beginning to end. Her ice-cold eyes were full of ridicule. "Well, since the matter has been explained clearly, there is nothing to continue talking about." Ni Hu looked at the exorcists at the side. "The result of the competition is obvious. My sister is the first to arrive at the entrance of the tomb, so the winner is our Ni family. You." Zhuge Yun bit his lips. Other than anger, there was also unspeakable grievance. He really wanted to go up and tear apart the Ni family's face. However, he knew that his ability was too limited. He couldn't even protect their victory, and could only be slaughtered by everyone. Just as Zhuge Yun was about to give up, his arm was pressed down. It was Hellion Vivian. She looked at Ni Biao and said unhurriedly, "This is the first time I've seen people with no bottom line like the Ni family. It's fine that others won, but you still insist that you're the one who won. You're so shameless, Master Ni. Aren't you afraid that it will affect the Ni family's image in the eyes of outsiders?" Hearing this, Ni Biao's face instantly darkened. He sneered, "Young man, you better watch your words. Not everyone is as tolerant as I am. I won't allow you to tarnish the Ni family's reputation again and again. Now you can't show any evidence to prove that you're the one who put up the flag. Master Ni, Are you saying that as long as I can show you evidence, you're shameless? Hellion Vivian asked calmly. That one sentence made Nihu's anger soar to the peak. He had a bad temper. If it were not for the fact that there were so many people around, he would have taken action. How could he tolerate others challenging the Ni family's reputation? If you're so capable, show me the evidence. Let me tell you, I'm not as nice as my father. If you can't show me the evidence, then don't blame the Ni family for being rude to you. Nihu bared his fangs and brandished his claws, insisting that no one would see Hellion Wei Wei and the rest planting the red flag. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows and stood in front of Nihu casually. What if I can show you the evidence? You're just bluffing, right? Nihu sneered. If you can prove that the red flag is yours, then I'll kneel down and call you Grandpa. I've tolerated you for long enough. If you don't have the ability, then why did you come to the Exorcist City to show off? Do you really think that the Ni family is a pushover? Chapter 737. All right. Hellion Vivian interrupted him. In the face of Nihu's arrogance, she was still as cold as ever. Her voice was not loud, even a little faint, but there was a strength that could not be ignored. Young Master Ni, you said it yourself. Aning, go and pull down the red flag. Let young Master Ni have a good look at who put it up. As soon as Hellion Vivian's voice fell, a figure flashed past in front of them. The figure moved very quickly, and in the blink of an eye, the red flag was erected in front of Nihu. The red flag was not big, so when it was in front of Nihu, he did not pay much attention to it. He even had a hint of disdain. What? You pulled out a person to show off your skills, and you want to use it as evidence? There are many people with such skills in our Ni family. Hellion Vivian glanced at him indifferently. She turned the red flag over with one hand and pressed her slender index finger on the bamboo pole. She stood there with her back straight and said in a lazy tone, Young Master Ni, you're thinking too much. What I want you to see is not in Ying's body, but this red flag. When you're free, ask your father to bring you to see a doctor. Can't you see such a big word? Nihu was so proud that he did not lower his chin. Now that he heard Hellion Vivian's words, he glanced at the red flag. With just one look, his entire body seemed to have been heavily choked. His eyes widened and his pupils suddenly shrank into a ball. The originally arrogant smile on his face stiffened just like that. Ni Biao also saw the mark on the flag. The red flag was originally hung up, but now it was turned over. Only then did he realize that there were words written on it. It was just a few strokes, but they were vigorous and vigorous. Even the ink had dried. It must have been written a long time ago. It was almost instantaneous. All the exorcists were in an uproar, as though they were boiling water. It's Zhuge. Zhuge is written on the flag. In other words, this red flag was put up by Zhuge Yun. So, the first team to reach the entrance of the tomb was actually not the Ni family's young master, but the Zhuge family's young master? Oh my God. A whole 6 hours more than us, how did they do it? Also, I've seen the map. Their path is more difficult, right? It is said that they have to pass through a waterfall. No one knows what is inside. I thought they were dead for sure. Amazing. Truly amazing. Like a tidal wave, the sound came from all directions. Zhuge Yun himself was a little dumbfounded. He stood there in a daze because he didn't know that there were words written on it. His two benefactors had never told him that there was the Zhuge family symbol on the red flag. Noticing his dumbfounded expression, Hellion Vivian didn't say anything. She just smiled gently. She always liked to hold back. Moreover, as a domineering CEO and an arms tycoon, how could she not mark her own territory when she occupied a mountain? She was very territorial, okay? So, doesn't this mean that the Ni family lost? Someone said and looked at Nihu and Ni Biao. Nihu had never expected such an ending. Ever since he was born, no one had ever looked at him with such a gaze. People had always held him in high regard. When had he ever encountered such a situation? He could only feel his face burning. He could not wait to raise his hand and kill Hellion Wei Wei with a single stroke of his sword. However, Ni who knew that he couldn't do it under the watchful eyes of the crowd, let alone kill. Ni Biao's expression did not look good either. The matter that was initially in his grasp had slowly turned out to be out of his expectations. Furthermore, the other party had even won the first round, which was a huge slap to the Ni family's face. He was too soft-hearted. If he knew this would happen, he would have ordered old Su and the rest to kill these 3 people directly on the way. However, the embarrassed Ni Biao had forgotten that old Su, whom he missed so much, still hadn't shown up yet. Ni Feng stood behind Ni Biao. Her eyebrows that were hidden under the veil frowned and her pale fingers clenched. Originally, this matter had nothing to do with her. She knew what her family was like and what her father and younger brother wanted to do. She was just pushing the boat along, but she didn't expect the other party to win. How was this possible? She was escorted by the guardians of the exorcising tribe all the way here. How could the other party be faster than her? However, the red flag with the word Zhuge in front of them explained everything. No matter how shamelessly the Ni family wanted to defend themselves, after seeing this red flag, they couldn't say anything anymore. Hellion Vivian looked at their expressions casually. Her fingertips slid across the flag and she smiled. Young Master Ni, you've seen the evidence. Next, shouldn't you kneel down and call us Grandpa? You. Ni who didn't expect that someone would dare to ask him to kneel down and call them Grandpa. He immediately lost his temper. Who do you think you are? Do you really want me to kneel down to you? Dream on. Hellion Vivian's eyes turned cold. When she looked at Ni who again, her eyes were sharp and cold. Are you going back on your words? The words going back on his words immediately made Ni who realize that the people around him were looking at him with disgust and mockery. No matter how bad his temper was, he had no choice but to swallow his anger and swallow his anger. Hellion Vivian was never one to be taken advantage of, not to mention this kind of person who wanted to slap her in the face. She turned her head and said to Ni Biao, Old Master Ni, you just said that we don't have evidence, so we can't ruin the Ni family's reputation again and again. However, your son's actions could only be described in 2 words, shameless and untrustworthy. Old Master Ni, is this how the Ni family teaches people? Upholding justice? Hee, is this just a slogan you use to deceive people? Ni Biao had never been forced to such an extent before. His entire face was ashen, and he could no longer squeeze out a smile. Hellion Vivian continued, I know that in your eyes, we are just a few foreign exorcists. We have no power and don't know how to exorcise. It's okay to bully him. After all, he is the young master of the Ni family. A simple sentence raised the matter to a whole new level. Bullying the weak was the most disdainful thing for exorcists. Originally, the exorcists already had opinions about Ni whose behavior. Now that they heard Hellion Vivian's words, they looked at the Ni family with eyes full of crusade. Ni Biao knew that he had to give everyone an explanation. Otherwise, the reputation that he had built up over the years would be completely destroyed. However, Ni who didn't realize this and was still shouting, What nonsense are you talking about? When did I ever bully you? These 2 were the ones who beat him up in front of the Zhuge mansion. We haven't settled our previous scores. Don't you dare. Chapter 738. Slap. Before Ni who could finish his sentence, a loud slap landed on his face. Ni who turned around in disbelief and looked at the person who slapped him. Even his eyes were shaking. Father, what about you? Hurry up and apologize to them. When Ni Biao said this, even his breathing was heavy. The sinister look in the depths of his eyes made Ni who keep quiet. After slapping his beloved son, Ni Biao turned around and wanted to smile, but the corners of his mouth were very stiff, our Ni family has never been treacherous. It's just that Ni who has been hot-tempered since he was young. He's also honest, so he didn't know what to say. Little brother, how about this? We'll be entering the tomb later. To express our apology, our Ni family is willing to offer you 3 demon sealing frost iron chains for you and your nephew to use. After all, we misunderstood you, so we should apologize. 3 demon sealing frost iron chains? When the other exorcists heard these words, their eyes lit up. One had to know that the frost iron chains were the best weapon against demons and ghosts in the exorcist city. Not only could it be used against demons, but it could also be used to bind the transformed corpses after they entered the tomb. No one could predict what they would encounter after entering the tomb. However, transforming corpses was the first thought that came to their minds. It was recorded in the art of yin and yang exorcism that tomb owners above the noble level would have pearls in their mouths, gold and jade covering their bodies, a protective jade on their chests, a jade rui in their hands, and even gems in their asses. The purpose of all these jade stones was to keep their corpses from rotting for thousands of years. Because of this, under normal circumstances, such corpses were the most likely to undergo transformation. Transforming corpses was the transition period between life and death. It was also known as the Bardo body stage in Buddhism. There were a total of 18 kinds of external forces, resulting in 18 types of transformation. For example, on a moonless night, if a negative cat happened to jump over the heart of a corpse at this time, it would cause the corpse to become a zombie. For example, in this case, the corpses didn't rot all year round. Once they came into contact with the yin energy underground, once someone entered and accidentally touched the corpse in the coffin, the combination of yin and yang would cause the corpse to transform. However, under normal circumstances, the more valuable the item was, the closer it was to the main coffin and the corpse. In other words, if one wanted to get the relics of the senior monk that had been buried with him, they had to go through the group of coffins. If he were to carry the demon sealing frost iron chain, it would be equivalent to leaving himself a way out. At the very least, if he were to encounter a zombie, he would be able to tie them up immediately and save his own life. After all, a corpse buried in a 1,000-year-old tomb was different from an ordinary corpse. Ordinary zombies could be temporarily stunned with yellow talismans. However, the corpses in the mausoleum were different. Yellow talismans were completely useless against them. This was something that all exorcists understood. Therefore, long before the competition, the price of the demon sealing frost iron chain had skyrocketed. Everyone hoped that they could have such a life-saving rope that could save their lives at a critical moment. Now, Ni Biao had thrown out 3 apologies at once. This was an exchange that would benefit them so much that anyone would agree to it. As spectators, the exorcists were extremely tempted. They all looked at Hellion Vivian. Ni Biao was confident that as long as he made such an offer, the other party would agree even if they didn't know what was good for them. After all, compared to those verbal apologies, the frost iron chain was much more valuable. No matter what, he couldn't let his beloved son kneel down and call these 3 people grandpa in front of so many people. If that happened, the Ni family would lose face. Even if the entire exorcist city and the whole world belonged to him in the future, it would still be a humiliation that couldn't be erased. Therefore, he had to prevent this from happening at all costs. In fact, he was very clear about the other party's intentions. They just wanted some benefits, so they wouldn't let go of the Ni family. After all, once a person's family business grew big, it was inevitable that some poor people would stick to him. He would give them some benefits to shut them up. Ni Biao had a good plan. He was about to ask his disciples to get the demon restraining frost iron. Hellion Vivian casually said, "Let's forget about the frost iron chain. We only want the conditions that young Master Ni agreed to." Her voice was as calm as usual, with a lazy and noble air. It was said that 2 people would become very similar after spending a long time together. Hellion Vivian and Beligaju already had some similarities in some aspects. Now, even the way they looked at people was the same. They didn't need to look down at each other. Just a casual glance was enough to give off a sense of noble oppression. Ni Biao never expected that someone would reject the exchange of 3 demon restraining frost iron chains. After hearing Hellion Vivian's words, the little smugness on his face was completely destroyed. Ni who was even more so because of Hellion Vivian's words. He was so angry that even the veins on his forehead were about to burst. He looked at Hellion Vivian with eyes full of venom. He looked like he wanted to bite her to death. Hellion Wei Wei did not even look at him. The side of her face was as fair as jade, and her unruffled composure made some of the exorcists admire her at this moment. Young Master Ni's initial conditions? Someone couldn't help but ask, isn't that kneeling? As soon as that was said, all the exorcists looked at the Ni family. Although not many people would do that, young Master Ni was the one who said it. He couldn't blame her for making him follow through. Father. Ni who saw this and could only turn to Ni Biao for help. At this time, Ni Biao was full of regret. A murderous intent that he had never felt before grew in his heart. However, he knew clearly that there was no turning back. Ni Biao took a deep breath. Every word seemed to be squeezed out from between his lips, go and apologize. But from now on, if anyone is in danger in the graveyard, don't expect the Ni family to save you. His words were nothing more than a threat. Hellion Vivian curled her lips into a smile. She didn't take his words seriously and said slowly, I have something here that I haven't had the chance to give to Master Ni. After young Master Ni apologizes, I'll let Master Ni see what it is. Ni Biao didn't want to talk to Hellion Vivian anymore. He turned his head away, his face full of viciousness. Ni who knew that at this point, it was useless for him to say anything else. He could only walk towards Hellion Vivian and the rest. Chapter 739. When his knees touched the ground, Ni whose face was twisted. He gritted his teeth and spoke in a low voice. When the words came out of his throat, he looked like a trapped beast. Ni Biao saw this and gripped his mahogany sword tightly. His beloved son whom he had spent so much effort to raise was forced to kneel by a few brats. He could not take this lying down no matter what. Go and get ready. Once we enter the tomb, think of a way to get rid of these people. Ni Biao ordered the people around him in a cold voice. His face was full of murderous intent. At this time, Ni who had already stood up. His face was full of dissatisfaction as he glared at Hellion Vivian and the rest. The disciples were upset and wanted to pull him, young master, slap. Ni who flung away the hand that was reaching him and pointed at Hellion Vivian, don't think that you're invincible just because you're fast. We've just arrived at the entrance of the tomb. It's not certain who will win or lose. Once we enter the tomb, you'll be begging for mercy. Hellion Wei Wei smiled and said slowly, before we set off, young Master Ni seemed to have said the same thing. However, in the end, the one who begged for mercy was not us, but you. You. This was what Ni who hated the most. Ni Biao blocked him and looked at Hellion Vivian with a gloomy gaze, little brother, don't be so full of yourself. We haven't entered the tomb yet. Who can predict what will happen in the future? Who knows what will happen in the end? As your senior, I'll give you a word of advice. Don't be too arrogant. Old Master Ni, you should say this to your son. Hellion Vivian looked up lazily and met Ni Biao's gaze. She did not back down, don't be too arrogant. Ni Biao laughed and squinted his eyes. His voice was cold, it seems that the news of you being the first to arrive at the entrance of the tomb has boosted your confidence. I don't know if you know, little brother, although you all arrived early, there are some people who left later than you. For example, my eldest daughter. She left in the last group. If you really want to count carefully, the winner might not necessarily be you all. After Ni Biao finished his sentence, his expression showed a hint of pride. Almost all the participating exorcists knew that his daughter, who was the reincarnation of the Phoenix girl, had set off alone 2 hours after everyone else had set off. She had been giving way to the members of the other families. Just this point alone was enough to cast doubt on the other party's victory. He wanted to see if people would agree that the Zhuge family had won the first round after he announced this news. Even if they agreed, it wouldn't be perfect. Do you want the Ni family to retreat after being humiliated? There was no such thing in this world. Needless to say, Ni Biao was indeed a meticulous schemer. After he finished speaking, the crowd started to discuss among themselves. Although the voices were soft, the effect that Ni Biao wanted had been achieved. He looked at Helian Vivian and the others, and the smile returned to his face. Helian Wei Wei looked at him. Her eyes were black and transparent, without a trace of impurity. She said calmly, "This is a competition. We have won according to the rules of the competition. However, old master and I, what are you using to pressure us with these kinds of words? According to Master Ni's calculation, does it mean that your Ni family sent out more than 30 disciples to fight against the three of us? Even if you were the first to arrive, it would still be considered a loss. After all, you have 10 times more people than us. Before the start of this competition, everyone thought that we were bound to lose. Now that we are the first to arrive at the entrance of the tomb, Old Master and I is trying to find some groundless reason to deny our victory. I would like to ask, is the winner decided by the rules of the competition, or Old Master and I himself? As the leader of the 12 shadows of the Tang sect, other than the arms business, she also majored in law and lawyer. Although it was not usually used, the Tang sect had specialized people in this area. Furthermore, there was the sly young Master Tang, who could settle a case with a few words. There was no need for her to show up. However, it did not mean that she did not know how to use it. If Ni Biao wanted to attack them verbally, he would have to ask for her permission first. Following Helian Vivian's words, Ni Biao's face froze again. This was because Helian Vivian's words were like a stone thrown into the water. Although it was not strong, it was enough to cause ripples because it hit the center of the water. The gazes of the surrounding people had changed, and whispers could be heard from the crowd. The number of people from the Ni family should be the sum of all our teams. It's easy to win. That's right. The Zhuge family only sent 3 people to participate in the competition. The rest of the children are too young to participate. It's already not easy to win under such circumstances. Why is Master Ni still so insistent? To put it bluntly, he's just unwilling to admit defeat. The Ni family has never lost before, so it's inevitable that he would feel unjust. If that's the case, then the Ni family is too much. Look at Ni whose unwillingness to apologize just now. This is not the demeanor of the exorcising tribe. Not necessarily, maybe it's a misunderstanding. I don't think that's what Master Ni meant. Let's wait and see. Ni Biao hated this feeling. Initially, he said those words to teach the other party a lesson, but he did not expect that he would end up shooting himself in the foot. He had underestimated this poor boy. He was not very capable, but he had a sharp tongue. Now that everything he said was wrong, did he really have to apologize to a junior in front of everyone? How was he going to convince the others in the future? Ni Biao clenched his fists so tightly that his fingers turned red. For the first time in his life, he tasted the feeling of being choked. No wonder Ni who was defeated by this poor boy twice in a row. This person's mind was more vicious than he thought. He also had some tricks up his sleeve and knew how to use the people around him to suppress him. He should have gotten rid of such a person long ago. This was not the first time Ni Biao regretted his actions, but this time, compared to the murderous intent, the resentment in his eyes gradually surged. Helian Wei Wei, who was standing in front of him, frowned, but before she could see clearly, Ni Feng, who was wearing a fur cloak and a long dress, stood in front of Ni Biao. Her voice was as gentle as flowing water, and it was soothing to the ears. Young master, as a father, they always like to praise their children. My father is the same. What he said to you just now, he didn't mean anything else. He just said that I set off late, so I hope you can understand the feelings of a parent and not think too much of him. Of course, the competition should follow the rules. No matter who set off first, the first one to reach the entrance of the tomb will be considered the winner. However, it's getting late, and there are still 2 more rounds of competition. As for the final result, we can't make a conclusion yet. It's more important to enter the tomb as soon as possible. Chapter 740. On the surface, Ni Feng's words sounded very understanding. After all, her tone was too gentle. After hearing it, people would only think that she was sensible, kind-hearted, and upright. In fact, her words not only helped Ni Biao out of his predicament, but also glossed over the fact that Hellion Vivian and the rest had won. She also hinted that this was not the final result of the competition. Hellion Vivian had never seen Ni Feng in this life, but she was familiar with her in her previous life. She had the same attitude, leaving the bad guys to others and fanning the flames behind. Compared to Ni Hu, this kind of person was the one she least wanted to see. The reincarnation of the Phoenix Girl? Hellion Vivian chuckled. Even if it was fake, it was too unqualified. However, people were always ignorant, and they trusted their eyes more than their hearts. Therefore, when Ni Feng spoke, there was naturally a round of agreement. Miss Ni is right, entering the tomb is more important. The most important thing for us is to get the Saraira. Reaching the entrance of the tomb is only the first step. No one knows what dangers we will encounter after entering the tomb. Therefore, we should go in as soon as possible before it gets too dark and try to get out of the tomb before the rooster crows. When Ni Feng heard that someone supported her, she immediately looked at that person and smiled gently. She had won a lot of favor from the exorcists. Hellion Vivian curved her thin lips. Her tone was light, but she hit the nail on the head. Miss Ni, the people who complicate this matter are Master Ni and Young Master Ni. You're always putting the blame on them, and I'm troubled by it too. Hearing this, Ni Feng's fingers paused. She clenched her fists and loosened them quickly. She coughed and said, "This was originally a misunderstanding. Unfortunately, my younger brother was too serious, which led to this situation. I'll apologize to you on behalf of my younger brother. Young Master, are you willing to accept?" Of course, Ni Feng did not mean to apologize. Listening to her carefully, one could tell that she was being aggressive and serious. Using her family's influence to oppress others was a misunderstanding. No matter how one listened to it, it did not sound like she felt that the Ni family was at fault. However, since Ni Feng had said so, Hellion Vivian would be considered petty if she did not respond. From the beginning until now, Ni Feng thought that she had figured out the character of the person in front of her. That was why she deliberately said such words to let Hellion Vivian refute. If that was the case, the one who would be looked down upon would not be the Ni family, but the person standing opposite her. However, what Ni Feng did not expect was that Hellion Vivian actually looked at her and smiled. That look was as if she could see through all her thoughts. She said indifferently, "Okay, you can apologize." Ni Feng paused for a moment. Then, she clenched her fists and narrowed her eyes. She never thought that the other party would agree so readily. Moreover, she didn't really want to apologize. She was prepared for what she would say next if the other party refuted her. She would make everyone hate the other party. But now, the situation was the complete opposite. It felt like she had placed the bait, but the other party didn't even look at her, let alone take the bait. Although an apology was just a formality to her. However, such a feeling of inferiority still made her feel very uncomfortable. However, Ni Feng was such a person. Even if she resisted, she would not show it on her face. Instead, like before, she coughed and said gently, "I'm sorry." Zhuge Yun was dumbfounded when he saw this scene going back and forth in the tomb. He had never seen anyone who could make the Ni family apologize in front of so many people. Hellion Vivian was one of them. She could force the Ni family to this extent by herself. Whether it was Zhuge Yun or the other exorcists, when they looked at Hellion Vivian again, their eyes were filled with shallow but obvious admiration. Young Master Zhao's team did not come up. If they were here, they would definitely hug Hellion Vivian's leg and call her boss. That group of people had witnessed part of Hellion Vivian's strength. Until now, other than Zhuge Yun, none of the exorcists present knew about Hellion Vivian's wisdom in retreating from the vampire bats. Of course, when they heard about it in the future, they were still shocked for a long time. The Ni family's father and son, who were unaware of all this, were still imagining that Hellion Vivian would kneel down and beg them for their lives after entering the tomb. Therefore, no one wanted to enter the tomb more than them. No matter how good they were at talking, they were still inexperienced in exorcism. When they entered the tomb, they would be in familiar territory. These three people would have to think twice before acting arrogantly. Ni who calmed down as he thought about it. He tried not to think about kneeling down and apologizing. Although the image kept replaying in his mind, and he felt like he was being slapped in public, he had to hold it in now. Only by holding it in could they return the favor. Time's up. Someone among the exorcists said, "It's already past noon. Even if someone comes up, they will only be considered as a team that has been eliminated. We don't have to wait anymore, we can enter the tomb now." This sentence made the exorcists who were originally seated tense up again. After all, the inside of the tomb was different from the outside. Once they entered, it meant that they would have to face unknown dangers. Even if they were exorcists, they would still feel afraid. It was because this tomb was too old, and there were many things that they did not understand. For this reason, the exorcist tribe specially found an old man who lived in Mount Tai Bai to lead the way. The old man was a local. He lived and ate in the mountains, so he was very familiar with this place. However, the tomb was a place that he would rather die than enter. If it was not for the expensive invitation, this trip into the tomb would not be easy. The old man was once an official in the previous dynasty. The so-called official was often said to be a tomb raider, who raided tombs for the imperial court. The exorcists knew how to exorcise evil spirits and suppress demons, but they were not proficient in this. They had to find someone like the old man to enter the tomb with them. Of course, if they could be like the Ni family and have more than two official in their own team, the chances of winning would be greatly increased. At the same time, it would also reduce the danger in the tomb. However, these tomb raiders were not omnipotent, especially those who worked for the imperial court. They were more disciplined than those who fought privately. For example, they would not touch the tombs during the golden chime, or they would light a candle at the southeast corner of the coffin before the tomb was opened. If the light was extinguished, they would have to leave immediately. It was said that this was an agreement between the living outside the tomb and the dead inside the tomb. Ni Biao did not care about these. He just wanted to get the Saraira at all costs. At the same time, he would let the arrogant brat have a taste of what it meant to regret. Once they entered the graveyard, they would know who was in charge here. Chapter 741. However, there was one thing that Ni Biao found strange. Why had Elder Su and the rest not arrived at the entrance of the tomb yet? Logically speaking, it was impossible. Even if they lost track of Zhuge Yun and the rest midway, with their abilities, they should have arrived before the time limit. Could it be that they had encountered some mishap? Ni Biao looked behind him, his eyes darkening. A disciple leaned over and whispered a few words in his ear. Ni Biao's eyes immediately narrowed. You didn't find them? Things were getting weirder. Where did Elder Su and the rest go? The disciple looked at Ni Biao's face and guessed. Could it be that Elder Su and the rest were taken away by the demon under the Zonghai waterfall? Ni Biao paused, then said, Impossible. Since the three brats could cross the Zonghai waterfall and reach the entrance of the tomb, it meant that the demon under the waterfall was not awakened, and Elder Su and the rest should be able to cross the waterfall as well. Forget it, it's not a big deal. Let's go in first. You guys wait outside the tomb and wait for Elder Sue and the rest. Ask them to wait here, there's no need to go back. When the time came for him to obtain the Sarira, once something went wrong, he could also ask Old Sue and the others to immediately solve the problem that could arise at any time. As proud as Ni Biao was, he never thought that there was another possibility, which was that Elder Sue, who he sent out, had been silently eliminated by someone else. He also did not know that the one who had the final say in the tomb was not him, but someone else who was the Devil King, that someone was now standing beside Hellion Vivian, quietly studying the stone wall at the entrance of the tomb with his deep eyes. His indifferent side profile had a strong scholarly aura. On the surface, he was definitely elegant and noble, but in fact, when he lowered his head, there was a faint smile on his face, revealing the devil's unique black-bellied aura. Interesting. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. What's interesting? Nothing. Beligaju tidied his robe, looked at the secret passage leading to the tomb, and said, "It's just that when I saw this tomb, I suddenly thought of an old friend." Hellion Vivian's interest was piqued. An old friend? Don't tell me it's an iPhone. It's not the kind of person who is important for no reason. Beligaju only gave Hellion Vivian this sentence, and then escorted her into the tomb. He did not tell Hellion Vivian that the old friend he mentioned was actually her previous life. The exorcist immortal who was rumored to be the one he was most afraid of. She should have lived was in this area at that time. Because he was on the mountain. Although he didn't meet that immortal face to face, he could feel the Buddhist aura surrounding Taibai Mountain at that time. He did not know what the original true form of that Buddhist chi was. He could even sense it from the Devil Realm, which was 3 feet underground. At that time, he didn't have much interest in conquering the demon realm. He just liked to kill and hunt. The most interesting thing was to see the struggle and cowardice of humans in the face of death. Under normal circumstances, those humans would cry and beg God to save them. Was God? He were AO of them. As of him, he were exorcist devil at the very least. He could help them complete their revenge, and he could help them get the wealth they wanted the most. Of course, all of this had to be exchanged with their souls. However, he gradually realized that those souls were too common. Everyone, was almost the same. They were all greedy, and they were all boring. That was why he still felt unsatisfied. It was not until he came into contact with the familiar Buddha's aura that his impetuous blood gradually calmed down. Judging from Father's expression, he's not thinking about his old lover, is he? Hellion Vivian's bigger fetus moved in her belly. He snorted and said to the smaller fetus, "I knew he was unreliable. Once Big Brother is out, I'll take Mother and you to a faraway place." The smaller fetus once again had the urge to facepalm. After all, his older brother was too professional in slandering his father. He seemed to be able to predict how impatient his father would be when he saw them after they left. He would probably throw them to the palace maids to take care of them. After all, his father had zero tolerance for anyone who disturbed him and his mother. But, Big Brother, did your power change today? The smaller fetus asked with wide eyes. The bigger fetus was still holding the smaller fetus carefully, as if he was protecting him. His voice was cool and soft. Yes. Once we're in the cemetery, my power will increase. Big Brother knows you can't get used to it. When the time comes, you don't have to help Big Brother purify it. Just close your eyes and have a good sleep. Don't worry about those demons. They can't hurt Mother. Father is still there. I'm not worried about the demons. As long as Father exudes his aura, they will naturally retreat. Just like that thing under the waterfall today. It ran away faster than the little loaches when it saw Father. I'm worried that the Een energy in the cemetery will be too strong, and Mother will be invaded by evil spirits. If that's the case, The smaller fetus did not finish his words. The bigger fetus interrupted him and said flatly, "Big Brother is here." The smaller fetus looked at the bigger fetus in front of him with his red eyes. Then, he smiled and nodded, completely trusting him. The bigger fetus patted his back clumsily and domineeringly. The two little ones hugged each other with their foreheads touching. It was a warm and loving scene. It was said that a mother and her child were connected by heart. Hellion Vivian smiled and caressed her lower abdomen, probably because she heard the sound in her stomach. Her face was full of gentleness. After entering the cemetery, everyone seemed to have quietened down. Especially when the official old man looked at the tombstone in front of him, his whole body trembling. The exorcists' faces also began to become solemn. "No, we still can't." The old man shook his head and said mysteriously, "We can't go in. Once the thing inside is released, we won't be able to lock it back in." Since they had already come this far, how could an Biao give up? He looked at the old man and said with a smile, "Elder Zhang, don't worry. We're all people who know Taoist techniques. We can lock it back in no matter what happens." As he said that, he ignored the old man's objection and ordered the Ni family's disciples behind him, "Go and open the door. Remember to take the dog's blood-red rope. If anything happens, act immediately." Yes. The Ni family's disciples were very fast. Zhuge Yun wanted to stop them, but he knew that it was useless because the other exorcists also wanted to open the door to the tomb and get the saraira. Chapter 742. The stone door was engraved with a sculpture of a beast with a human face. It gave off an eerie feeling that one should not offend. The Ni family was about to walk over. He didn't know where the wind came from, but it made a strange, light sound. Then, someone shouted, "Look, what is that?" Hellion Vivian followed the person's finger and looked over. At dusk, beside the originally empty tomb, a meandering river appeared on both sides of the tomb. The water slowly flowed down the mountain. It was extremely deep. The water was clean, and there were aquatic plants growing in the river. It looked harmless on the surface. However, Hellion Vivian found it strange that there was not a single fish in the water. The most bizarre thing was that not only were there no fish, there were no other creatures besides the seaweed. The color of the seaweed was very dark, and all of them grew in the dark, floating above the river. From afar, it looked like the long hair of a drowned woman floating in the air. Moreover, they all saw that there was no river here. Why did a river appear when they were about to enter the tomb? Could it be a warning to them? Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows and looked at the changes in the river vigilantly. The other exorcists had never encountered such a situation. They looked at each other and gripped the peach-wood swords in their hands tightly. Ni Biao was very excited. He looked at the river in front of him and said in high spirits, "It is said that the Yin River will appear when the sun goes down near the tomb. I didn't have the chance to see it before, but now that I have seen it, it is indeed a river that can connect the two realms of Yin and Yang. It is really amazing." Hearing the words Yin River, the exorcists were stunned. The Yin River was recorded in the Book of Exorcism. It was said that this river could not be seen during the day. Only at night, under the illumination of the moonlight, would a small flowing river appear. This river connected the two realms of Yin and Yang. Crossing it would allow one to pass through life and death and find the secret of immortality. Therefore, the exorcists' eyes were shining. They did not think of any warnings and were about to wade through the water. However, Hellion Wei Wei's group of people were all very steady and did not rush to move forward. At this time, the old man looked at the river and suddenly trembled. "You can't go." "Why?" Some of the exorcists turned around and asked. The old man pointed at one end of the river with a trembling finger. Only then did the exorcists realize that there was a coffin standing there. Placing a coffin in the water was an ominous sign in feng shui. Not to mention that it had appeared in the Yin River. The old man, Guando, seemed to be very afraid of the coffin. He said with conviction, "I've seen it before. It has appeared before. Everyone, do not open the tomb. Didn't you never come to the mausoleum? How could you have seen the coffins here?" Ni who did not take it seriously. In his eyes, this old man was just a precaution. Who knew that he would be so troublesome and always wanted to stop them? He did not even try to find out how powerful the Ni family was. Did he think that he could fool him by lying? Guando. The old man knew that Ni who did not believe him, so he started to talk about his past. He had indeed seen this coffin before. At that time, there was a village at the mountainside. At that time, a rich official came to their village and wanted to enter the mausoleum. No villagers dared to go with him, so the official wandered around the mountainside every day. He remembered very clearly that a coffin floated in the river that night. It was probably because the official's search team had disturbed something during that time. The official ignored their obstruction and did not listen to his advice. He insisted on digging the coffin out of the river. Digging in the ground in broad daylight could have avoided some danger. However, at the moment the coffin was out of the river, countless vampire bats flew out of the forest. Those flying bats seemed to be a warning. People in the underworld knew that if there was something strange on the day of the coffin opening, it was a bad omen. The official was greedy and did not listen to anyone's advice. He said that this was a tomb within a tomb. As long as the coffin was lifted, they could enter the tomb and find the treasure of immortality. Therefore, even though he knew that opening the coffin was dangerous, he still ordered his men to continue with the work without delay. Since he could not stop it from happening, the old man could only tell the official that once the ancient coffin was out of the river, he must use the dog blood red rope to mark the coffin. He thought that by doing so, at least some danger could be avoided. However, before the ancient coffin was out of the river, there was a sudden rainstorm in the forest. The sound of nightingales could be heard in the forest, one after another, louder than the other, making people's hair stand on end. The official had no choice but to stop the work because it was impossible to drag a coffin that weighed more than 100 kilograms out of the river in such bad weather. At first, the old man was secretly relieved. However, he did not expect that by the next day, those who wanted to lift the ancient coffin would die one by one. Those who had a weak life force died that night, while those who had a strong life force only survived until dawn. The official's death was even more strange. First, he was hungry and kept eating. Everything in his mouth tasted tasteless. In the end, he stopped eating and told the servants that he was sleepy and wanted to sleep. In the end, after dawn, the official's wife knocked on the door many times, but no one came to open it. She ordered the servants to break in through the window and found that the official was already dead. He was in a very strange position, lying on the ground. No wound could be found, but there was an indescribable distortion on his face, as if he had seen something extremely horrible. No one knew what he had seen, but what made people feel uneasy was that his whole body was wet, as if he had been soaked in the river. But in fact, the official's wife said that he had not left the room for the whole night. Then, where did the river water come from? No one dared to guess, and no one dared to go near the coffin. However, this did not prevent the disaster from happening. The villagers started to fall ill inexplicably, and the children started to cry at night. As long as one saw the opening of the coffin, they would have nightmares at night, even if they moved out of the village. The old man thought that he was going to die at that time. If he did not have a dream later on, a woman appeared in his dream. That woman's every movement was filled with subduing nobility and elegance. She was bright and dazzling. There seemed to be a Buddhist light slowly flowing around her body. She exuded a faint sandalwood fragrance. She was like a faintly discernible phoenix, making people involuntarily feel at ease when they looked at her. Chapter 743. The woman said that in order to get through this ordeal, each family had to offer their blood, no more, no less. They just had to put it outside the door late at night. The old man was still a teenager at that time. Although he was young, he had already started his career as an official. Although he was not proficient in Taoism, he knew the general idea. He had heard of people using dog's blood to exorcise evil spirits, but who would use human blood to exorcise evil spirits? However, the old man still followed the woman's instructions and asked the villagers to do it. After all, they had no choice but to give up after reaching that stage. What they didn't expect was that after that, no one in the village had any more dreams, and no one died for no reason. However, the pot of blood that was placed outside the window was taken away by someone. Later on, the river overflowed that year and flooded many fields. It also submerged the exposed ancient black wood coffin at the bottom of the river. It had been submerged for a full 40 years. Now, this ancient coffin had appeared again. The old man's fear was imaginable. He looked at the ancient black wood coffin with trembling eyes, and his heart gradually sank. Naturally, he would not let the exorcists go over no matter what. After listening to the old man's story, who thought for a while, and suddenly his eyes lit up. You said that the woman in your dream had the phoenix spell on her, right? The old man nodded. Then it should be the phoenix girl. Who laughed. Then what's there to be afraid of? Let me tell you, my elder sister is the reincarnation of the phoenix girl. Look at her carefully, isn't she similar to the woman in your dream? As he spoke, who pointed at Feng. Feng was wearing a veil, and only a pair of gentle eyes could be seen. The old man felt that the all-encompassing aura was familiar. Seeing that the old man did not deny it, who was even more proud. He smiled at the exorcists. Everyone, don't worry. With my elder sister here, all problems can be solved. As he spoke, he deliberately glanced at Hellion, Vivian and the rest, and said coldly, after entering the tomb, we will begin to divide into groups. Those who follow the Ni family will not be in danger. Those who deliberately go against the Ni family, don't blame the Ni family for not helping you when the time comes. Everyone knew who he was referring to with that last sentence. Who thought that the two amateurs would regret it and come to beg them. Unexpectedly, the other party had no intention of apologizing at all. Instead, he took the lead and walked to the front. When Hellion Vivian's side profile passed by the old man, she still had a lazy smile on her face. Beligaju stood beside her. His elegance was indifferent, and his temperament was like water. The old man paused for a moment and then rubbed his eyes. He must have seen wrongly. How could a man be the benefactor in his dreams? Although this was what the old man thought, he still placed his gaze on Hellion Vivian's face. He felt that the more he looked at her, the more he felt that they were similar. However, he knew in his heart that it was impossible for the other party to be him. Such a person exuded spiritual energy all over her body, which was very similar to the veiled young lady of the Ni family. Another one who was deceived. Zhuge Yun said softly. His clear eyes looked at the coffin in the middle of the Yin River. The old man's dream is indeed related to the Phoenix girl. However, if the young lady of the Ni family is not the Phoenix girl, we will definitely encounter a lot of dangers in the tomb. Brother Wei, Brother Zhu, you must be more careful. Especially you, Brother Wei. I know that you are smart and know what ordinary people don't, but after all, you don't have spiritual energy to protect your body. Don't act alone, and we can't get separated. Hellion Vivian saw that Zhuge Yun was serious, so she did not reject his kindness. She only smiled meaningfully. Okay. She did not expect that she would appear in someone's dream in her previous life. She felt that it was quite novel, and her furry head moved along. Beligaju reached out and held her hand. His voice was faint. Are you very happy? Hellion Vivian said to Beligaju in a tone that only the two of them could hear. It's always refreshing to hear someone talk about their past life. Beligaju looked at her smiling eyes. He was very dissatisfied with the current situation. If these people were not here, he could kiss her face. However, she was wearing men's clothing, so it was not convenient for him to do anything. If you want to know about your past life, you can ask me. Hearing this, Hellion Vivian was stunned. She asked with interest, you know about my past life? Did we know each other in our past life? Not really. Beligaju's deep voice was very pleasant to hear. Do you still remember the exorcist immortal that the little king of hell said that I was afraid of? His voice was slow and graceful. That was the Phoenix girl from back then, your past life. After Hellion Vivian heard this, her beautiful eyes narrowed. She smiled very proudly. So, in my past life, I was stronger than you. I defeated you, right? Beligaju. This stupid woman always has a different kind of obsession when it comes to dueling with me. I thought that you had already given up on this unrealistic idea. Beligaju glanced coldly at Hellion Vivian beside him. That glance fully displayed his disapproval. This made Hellion Vivian raise her eyebrows. Is that not the case? Of course not. We haven't fought at all, nor have we met face to face. Beligaju's voice was as indifferent as usual, but compared to before, it was not as smooth as before. There was a pause. Hellion Vivian looked at his darkened eyes and smiled lazily. Her smile was as bright as the light, and she had the demeanor of a queen. I thought so too. We haven't met face to face in our past life. Otherwise, how could I not keep such a good-looking man like you and make you my husband? But it doesn't matter. It's the same in this life. Idiot. Bailey Jia Ju chuckled softly and leaned close to her ear. His warm breath was tingling as it hit the back of her neck. You're right. It's impossible for me to not tie you up after seeing you again. You're asking for a beating. The two of them had been together for so long. Of course, Hellion Vivian knew what Beligaju meant by asking for a beating. Her face flushed. She did not look at the man's seductive smile anymore. Instead, she changed the topic. It's strange. What's strange? Beligaju held Hellion Vivian's hand as if no one was around. In fact, no one could hear their conversation because everyone's eyes were focused on admiring an iPhone. Hellion Vivian looked around and did not forget to reply to Beligaju. Logically speaking, one of us is an exorcist, and the other is a demon. We should have fought. Even if we didn't fight, we should have met face to face. After all, we're on opposite sides. Why does it sound so peaceful when you say it? She was indeed the little one he raised. She was so smart that she could detect all the problems. This was also what Beligaju had been thinking about recently. Chapter 744. Maybe it was just like what the little king of hell said, that they knew each other back then. At the very least, she knew him. Otherwise, she wouldn't have stood behind him and watched him leave. Beligaju's beautiful eyes deepened. If they really knew each other, it was before he fell from heaven. Why? Hellion Vivian looked at him from the side. Is it that hard to answer? I thought we would love to kill each other. Exorcists and demons are such good material. Beligaju laughed. Exorcists? That's what normal people think. In fact, you weren't human at that time. Not human? Then what was I? Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. Beligaju's voice was faint. God. A phoenix in fire, born from nirvana. A person with such a dharma could very well be related to the gods and Buddhas. Hellion Vivian was even more puzzled. She muttered to herself, if I were a god, would have gone to find trouble with you. Why didn't I fight with you? What a pity, I wasted such a good opportunity. You really want to fight with me? Bailey Jia Ju turned around abruptly. While no one was looking at them, he lowered his head and kissed her ear. He loosened his grip as soon as he touched it. He was very gentle. Sure. If you lose, you'll be at my disposal. Hellion Vivian didn't say anything else. Her face turned even redder. When Zhuge Yun turned around, his face was full of confusion. Did something happen? Hellion Vivian coughed lightly and continued to walk forward with a lazy expression. On the contrary, Bailey Jia Ju's mood was much better. The corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. The light of the torch shone into his eyes and was reflected. The surface of his skin presented a kind of diamond-like texture, and one could vaguely see the evil gold. Zhuge Yun wanted to take a closer look, but Beligaju looked up and glanced at him lightly. His elegance was almost enchanting. Zhuge Yun shook his head. He must have seen wrongly. How could such a person have a demonic nature? However, as a human, Zhuge Yun did not know that demons had extremely strong imitation abilities. When they first entered the world, they had already learned the human's obsession and greed incisively and vividly. Therefore, at times, high-level demons could be as elegant as gentlemen. The inexperienced Zhuge Yun did not pay much attention to it and continued to follow the group. People deliberately avoided the black wooden coffin. The old man was right. That ancient coffin was indeed very strange. The coffin was covered in markings, and there was a yellow talisman stuck to the coffin. The yellow talisman was from a very long time ago, and if it wasn't for the demon-binding frost iron chain, it would have been washed away by the current. Fortunately, exorcism could resist external forces. Even so, no one could afford to be careless. He did not know if it was Nihu's illusion, but he felt that the black wooden coffin would follow them wherever they went. Finally, they went around the Ain River and reached a distance where they could push open the door of the tomb. At this moment, Nihu rolled his eyes and a sinister plan came to his mind. Brother Yun, since you're the first to arrive, shouldn't you be the one to open the door of the tomb? What? Zhuge Yun did not expect Nihu to do this. Ni Biao also knew what his beloved son was thinking. He glanced around, and the two disciples of the Ni family immediately put away the dog blood red rope and demon-binding frost iron chain that they had prepared. Nihu laughed arrogantly. Why, Brother Yun? Are you afraid? That's impossible. Wasn't your team the first to arrive at the tomb? Why don't you dare to open the door? Zhuge Yun knew that Nihu did it on purpose. Every exorcist knew how dangerous it was for the first person to open the door to the tomb. The methane from the underground would gush out immediately. If the exorcist was not full of spiritual energy, it was very likely that he would die from the methane. Moreover, this was not an ordinary tomb, but a 1,000-year-old tomb. No one knew what would happen if they opened the door of the tomb. Brother Yun, we're all waiting. There's not much time left, hurry up. Nihu gloated and urged, waiting to see Hellion Vivian and the rest put on a good show. He knew about Zhuge Yun's power. Although he had the strongest spiritual power in his generation, it was not enough to open the door of the tomb. However, it was far from enough to open the tomb. The chances of it being a disaster were extremely high. As for the other two amateurs, Nihu did not even consider them. They might be able to fight, but they might not be able to resist the evil of the tomb. Looking at their empty hands, it was obvious that they were not qualified exorcists. Firstly, they did not have the Chinese talisman, and secondly, they did not have the dog blood red rope. No matter how one looked at it, they were just looking for death. He was not afraid that Zhuge Yun would refuse. Once he refused, the Zhuge family's victory would not be counted. No matter how one looked at it, the Ni family was the one who got the better end of the deal. After all, it was the rules of the competition. Although the other exorcists knew that Nihu was being unethical, it was still a competition. A competition was a competition. One had to abide by the rules. If one could not win, one should not win. Zhuge Yun looked at Nihu's provocative gaze and knew that he had to accept it. All right, but I have a request. I'll go alone. Anyway, it's just opening the tomb door. My other two teammates will stay outside. Of course, we're not unreasonable people. As long as Brother Yun follows the rules of the competition and opens the tomb door, it'll be fine. Nihu sneered in his heart. He only wanted one of the three to die. As for the other two, he was not in a hurry. Zhuge Yun bit his thin lips. Holding the peachwood sword, he was about to go over. A slender figure blocked his way. The figure was tall and straight, exuding a strong aura of abstinence. I'll open it. Zhuge Yun paused and wanted to refuse. However, His Highness had always done things his own way and would not give anyone a chance to speak. He strolled over and curled his thin lips into a faint smile. The moment their eyes met, whose heart skipped a beat. Perhaps it was because of the light in the graveyard, his skin was too pale, or perhaps it was because of the contrast between his white and blue robes, but his eyes were clearly shining with golden light, yet it made people feel that his eyes were incomparably distant. Who was confused. Why did he feel that this man was excited? It's good to know nothing. Biao smiled kindly with a hint of sarcasm in his voice. You don't even know what might happen when you open the tomb door. You still have the right to be arrogant. Old people like us can't do it. We never dare to take on things that we can't do. After saying that, he shook his head regretfully as if he was worried about Beligaju. He seemed to be sure that Beligaju would not be able to walk back alive. The rest of the exorcists shared the same opinion as Biao. They also felt that this was an extraordinary matter that an ordinary outsider could not do. Chapter 745. Brother Wei. Zhuge Yun looked at Hellion Vivian anxiously. Ask Brother Zhu to come back. Opening the tomb door is not an easy task. Let me go instead. At least I'll have a chance to survive. Hellion Vivian smiled. Young Master Yun, you have to learn to trust your teammates. Zhuge Yun did not know what to say. Not only did he trust him, but he was also afraid of Brother Zhu. Otherwise, he would not have asked Brother Wei to persuade him. It's all right. Hellion Vivian patted the young man's shoulder. It's just opening a door. Zhuge Yun wanted to roar. What do you mean by it's just a door? This is not their home. This is a tomb, a 1,000-year-old tomb. Zhuge Yun knew that if Brother Wei did not ask, Brother Zhu would not come back. He was so anxious that his face turned pale. His hand that was pressing on the peachwood sword clenched tightly. Who looked at the scene and felt a little better. The smile on his face grew wider. He was waiting to see Zhuge Yun's team cry. However, Bailey Jia Ju didn't put him in his eyes at all. His slightly curly long hair followed the cloak and fell vertically, sweeping across the ice-cold steps, as deep as the night. Under the dim light of the torch, he casually raised one hand. His white teeth scratched his black gloves and tightened them. His handsome and clear face had a hint of arrogance. It was an ordinary action, but when he did it, it brought out a sense of superiority, as if he was a noble who only appeared in King of England movies. Hellion Vivian looked at him. There was never a moment like this where she felt that he was a complete demon. He confused people's eyes and bewitched people's hearts. It seemed that after entering the ancient tomb, his demonic nature had become stronger. That kind of aloofness, and omnipotence was becoming more and more apparent. However, no one knew. In Whose eyes, he was just a good-looking boy. All the exorcists took a step back, thinking that he had to do something to open the tomb. However, Beligaju did not do anything. He smiled and pressed his black-gloved fingers on the tomb door. Then, he exerted force. A loud rumbling sound rang out. What greeted them were clusters of black feathers that streaked across the sky and let out a long, sharp whistle. They danced and fell from the sky as if they were alive. The exorcists were all shocked. They all picked up the peachwood swords in their hands and hurriedly pointed at the entrance of the tomb. Only Beligaju's tall figure didn't change in the slightest. He strode out from the cluster of feathers. As the feathers fell to the ground, everything in the ancient tomb moved away, becoming a backdrop for him. Black rose up and filled the sky. He stood in the shadow of the feathers with a smile that was not a smile. The smooth curve of his chin reminded Hellion Vivian of the scene when she saw him in the demon world. 80 miles down, the Yellow Springs blue sky, the flowers of the other shore in bloom. He walked inside, his back tall and straight, his long robe fluttering in the wind, causing countless demons to tremble. That was the true king of darkness. Just like how he was now. Compared to Beligaju's elegance and calmness, the rest of the exorcists seemed to have gone crazy. They pulled out their swords and began to cut off the strange feathers, afraid that they would provoke something unclean. However, they did not expect that as soon as they raised their hands, the feathers would disappear without a trace. What's going on? Ni, who had never encountered such a strange thing. He thought that the feathers had drilled into his body and wanted to shake it off in panic. Although this group of people were all exorcists, they were people from ancient times after all. Their minds were filled with ghosts, and nothing else. When they realized that their Taoist techniques could not be used, they would definitely panic. Among them, Ni Biao's expression was still normal, but the rest were not so shocked. The most unbelievable thing was that Beligaju was still alive. Moreover, there was no trace of injury on his body. How was this possible? Ni, who widened his eyes and stared at Beligaju, how could you be completely fine? Even he could not guarantee that he could come back alive, but it was as if it was as simple as opening a door. Bailey Jia Ju didn't even look at him. He just casually brushed off his own green and white robes. Ni, who had never been belittled like this before. His voice became hoarse as he asked, "Did you do something to it? Or were you possessed by the evil spirit on the feather? Is that why you, young master Ni?" Before Ni who could finish his sentence, Helian Wei Wei interrupted him with a languid voice. "The feather that you're talking about is not real. Every time we open an ancient tomb, we will definitely encounter this situation. When the 1,000-year-old murals in ancient tombs come into contact with the air, the paint of the murals will fall off and evaporate. After a wonderful reaction with the air, it will appear as if it is really alive, but in fact, it is just an illusion. Otherwise, how could the feathers disappear just like that? Young Master Ni, before you suspect others in the future, use your brain and see what is on the walls of the tomb." After Helian Vivian's reminder, the exorcists saw the black feathers engraved on the walls. Everyone roared with laughter. Of course, they were laughing at Ni whose words. Ni whose entire face was red, but he had nothing to refute Helian Vivian. He could only stand there, wishing that he could take back his words. The exorcists were still laughing. However, when they thought about it carefully, even they were flustered when the tomb was opened, let alone the others. The only ones who were calm from the beginning to the end, other than the eldest daughter of the Ni family, were these two foreign exorcists. Furthermore, what did this person mean by volatilizing? Was this something that a normal person would know? What was even more unexpected was that the Guando elder actually agreed. "This young master is right. The illusion during the tomb opening is occasionally encountered when we rob tombs." If the other party had not mentioned it, he would have forgotten about it. He was really ashamed. He was not a competent Guando elder at all. Thinking of this, the Guando elder turned around and said to the group, "With this young master here, there is no need for me to follow. He knows more than me, and the one who opened the tomb door is fearless. I have never seen such a person before. I really admire him." "You flatter me. I only know a little. It is better to have an elder with me." Helian Vivian had always been polite. She lowered her head to the Guando elder in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. The Guando elder was a little dazed at that moment. Too similar. Chapter 746. At this time, the exorcists who heard the old man's words began to discuss. "Zhuge Yun's family is really amazing this time. I thought they were lucky to be the first to arrive, but now it seems that their ability is on par with the Ni family. This is too shocking." Who said otherwise? Even Old Li acknowledged them. The exorcists' voices were getting louder and louder. Ni who felt extremely unbalanced when he heard that. Thinking about the laughter he received just now, and then looking at the people around him who were treating Zhuge Yun and the rest as heroes, a strong sense of unwillingness rushed into his mind. Isn't it just opening a tomb door? What's so great about it? Ni who said as he took a step forward with the servant beside him, "Any disciple of the Ni family can do it." "You." Zhuge Yun was so angry that he wanted to walk over, but Helly and Vivian blocked his way. Zhuge Yun turned around in confusion. Helly and Vivian smiled with a hint of meaning. Let them go. Why? They were the ones who opened the tomb door first. Zhuge Yun was even more confused. He raised his hand and scratched the back of his head. Ni swaggered forward. The two disciples of the Ni family on his left and right thought that nothing was going on. Without thinking, they pushed the remaining half of the door to the side. Ni was still smiling. His eyes were full of contempt when he looked at Helly and Vivian and the rest. What he did not expect was that in the next second, the two Ni family disciples in front of him seemed to have been bewitched, as they fell forward in a daze. There was an indescribable eerie smile on their faces, as if they had seen something before they died. In just a moment, Ni's expression changed. Even his legs were trembling because if it were not for the two disciples in front of him, the one who would be dead now would be him. The fear that he had never felt before was like an invisible hand that firmly grasped Ni's heart. Even his breathing was sluggish. The other exorcists also froze in their actions at that moment. Horror slowly spread in their eyes, reflecting the faces of the dead. Ni Biao reacted the fastest. He pulled Ni back, worried that something might happen to his beloved son. There was a deathly silence at the scene. No one had expected that a moment ago, they were still chatting, and the next moment, such a situation would occur. What made them most uneasy was that there were no signs at all. Whether it was a vengeful spirit or a ghost, they didn't even see it. They just pushed open the door of the tomb, and two people died for no reason. The exorcists all had different expressions on their faces. A tense atmosphere quietly spread among the crowd. We'd better be careful. Someone reminded him, the mausoleum is a 1,000-year-old tomb. It's different from the usual tombs. It's best not to rashly move forward. Obviously, this sentence was directed at the young master of the Ni family, who wanted to show off. When Ni Biao heard this, he was naturally displeased, but he could not show it on his face. After all, in this situation, he really could not let his guard down. But how did they die? This was what scared all the exorcists the most. They were not afraid of ghosts and demons. At the very least, they could see those things. What they were most afraid of was that some things were out of their control. Zhuge Yun looked at the side of Helly and Vivian's face. He did not know why, but his intuition told him that Brother Wei would definitely know the answer. Helly and Vivian smiled. She indeed knew, marsh gas is also known as poisonous gas. After the ancient tomb has not been opened for a long time, after the air evaporates, only marsh gas that is harmful to the human body is left. If you don't pay attention, you will be poisoned. A few casual words, but it attracted the attention of the exorcists again. How does this person know everything? That's amazing. Is he really a newbie? He doesn't look like one at all. He really doesn't have spiritual energy. Think about it carefully. The things he said are not even mentioned in the exorcism books. So he doesn't know exorcism, but he knows ancient tombs very well? It's more than that. Didn't you hear what Elderly said? If this person is here, there's no need for him to come. This means that he knows at least as much as Elderly. Someone was shocked. From the initial indifference to the current amazement, the exorcists could not describe their current feelings. They truly realized how strong the Zhuge family was this time. Ni Biao's eyes narrowed dangerously when no one was paying attention. It seemed that he had to get rid of these three eyesores. They only knew a little about the 8 diagrams of the tomb, but they had embarrassed the Ni family time and time again. If he did not get rid of them, they would most likely be a problem in the future. He would not let go of any obstacles that blocked his way. It was not the right time to make a move. Once they entered the tomb and the teams separated, he would let these three have a taste of the Ni family's methods. Even now, Ni Biao still felt that the other party was not afraid of them. Understanding the graveyard would be a great help to them, but if they really wanted to reach the end, they would have to rely on their own spiritual power and exorcism. Among the 3 people, 2 of them had no cultivation at all. Such a team could only shine at the very beginning. Soon, they would have nowhere to cry. There were also exorcists who had the same thoughts as Ni Biao. Although they were impressed, they had to take a long-term view. Therefore, they did not participate in the discussion. They just looked at the absent-minded Elder Guan Do and asked, "Elderly, can we go forward now?" Elderly finally came back to his senses and said, "Yes, we can go now. Keep your eyes open." Okay. Even without Senior Lee's reminder, everyone's attention was raised. They were highly concentrated and didn't dare to be distracted. They stepped forward, deliberately bypassed the corpses lying on the ground, and walked into the tomb door one by one. The cemetery was very spacious. It was so magnificent that it was like an underground palace. Even the ground under their feet was made of stone, not to mention those statues. What are these things? One of the Ni family's disciples stretched out his hand and pointed curiously at the black iron-like thing that covered the statues. After looking at it for a long time, he did not know what it was. He could only see that it was faintly glowing. Elderly saw it and immediately shouted, "Don't touch it." The Ni family's disciple was so frightened that he immediately retracted his hand. Chapter 747. Those are insects that eat the flesh of corpses. Don't touch them. You won't be able to get rid of them if you touch them. Elder Lee's voice was so low that it made the hearts of those who heard it sink. The exorcists fell silent once again. Ni Feng, the eldest daughter of the Ni family, who had been silent all this while, suddenly spoke with a gentle voice. "Are you talking about corpse puppets, Elderly?" "That's right." Elderly turned around as if he had seen the light at the end of the tunnel. "I didn't expect Miss Ni to know about corpse puppets. You're really knowledgeable." Ni Feng smiled gently. The translucent white veil on her face accentuated her ethereal beauty. "It's nothing. As an exorcist, it's normal for me to know about this." Elderly knew that she was being modest. Looking at the exorcist's reactions, he knew that corpse puppets would not be born in normal tombs. Firstly, the tombs were not deep enough, and secondly, they had not been there for long enough. Only those who frequently raided tombs would have come into contact with corpse puppets. She must be extraordinary to know about this. Elder Lee's initial suspicion was dispelled once again. He must have robbed too many tombs to have an illusion that he should not have. The real reincarnation of the Phoenix girl was right in front of him, but he felt that the handsome and clean young man was his savior in his dreams. Indeed, he was old and his mind was muddled. Elderly shook his head and did not say anything. Instead, he took a step forward and raised the torch in his hand to illuminate the path ahead, leaving behind a group of exorcists who were worshipping Ni Feng. "You're indeed the Phoenix girl. You even know about this. If we can get the Sorira this time, my team will be convinced even if we lose. If we can be defeated by Miss Ni, this trip will not be in vain." Seeing this, Ni whose pale face immediately broke into a smile. He glanced at Helly and Vivian and the rest and said slowly, "My sister has always been knowledgeable and low-key, unlike some people who only know a little and insist on showing it. I'm afraid they're just talking. When they really encounter something later, they'll be scared out of their wits. Take corpse puppets as an example. Some people are still having a headache over how to deal with them." Everyone could tell who he was referring to. The exorcists had to admit that Ni whose words made sense. After all, it was only because of the environment of the ancient tomb that Zhuge Yun's group seemed to be very powerful. In fact, no one had seen them fight with their own eyes. However, Helly and Vivian and her team did not take Ni whose provocation seriously, especially His Highness. Wherever he looked, there was only Helly and Vivian and Helly and Vivian. To him, other humans were just dispensable food. He did not even bother to destroy their souls because they did not smell fresh. Hellion Vivian didn't understand why His Highness' expression looked like a cat that was picky about its food. She just felt that his noble, elegant, and disdainful arrogance was very much like him when he was young. His cute little highness, she really wanted to hold him in her hand and pinch him. Hellion Vivian thought so and did as she was told. Beligaju was a little confused by her pinch. He raised his thick eyebrows and said wickedly, "Do you want me to help you remove your claws again?" Hellion Vivian's bright and clear eyes had a perfect smile. She said in a roguish manner, "No, I want to kiss you. Unfortunately, there are people around." Anyway, she knew that His Highness did not like to be watched, so she did not have to worry about him sneaking up on her. Naturally, she would tease him freely. "You seem to be very proud of yourself." Beligaju smiled. His voice was so low that it was sexy. "Uh-huh." Hellion Vivian continued to walk forward in a good mood. She was sure that he would not have a chance to do anything to her. She found the fun of teasing His Highness again. Bailey Jia Ju also didn't stop her, only slightly leaned his body forward a bit. From the side angle, it looked extremely natural, but in reality, he was already very close to Wei Wei. His long and thick eyelashes followed his movements, forming a shadow, brimming with bewitchment. "Wait until there's no one else, then this highness will fulfill your wish." Hellion Vivian suddenly froze. Wasn't she the one who was teasing him? Why did it seem to be the opposite in the end? And she knew that His Highness had always been a man of his words, ahem. Hellion Vivian lowered her voice and said in a tone that only the two of them could hear, "Actually, this kind of thing doesn't have to be done." "How can I do that? I am a demon raised by my master." Beligaju's voice slowly rose. His whole body was full of asceticism. "Of course I have to satisfy all of my master's needs at all times." Hellion Vivian. So, it had to be done. No, that was not right. In any case, young Master Yun would always be with them. His Highness might not have a chance to make a move. Imperial Mother still believes in Imperial Father's character too much. The smaller fetus heard the noise outside and slowly woke up. There was a smile in his weak voice. The bigger fetus reached out to protect the smaller fetus. He asked in a cool and gentle voice, "Does Imperial Father have any character?" The smaller fetus, Big Brother, really did not like Imperial Father. He had already started to criticize him. Compared to the happy family of four, the others were like headless flies. They stood in place, not knowing which path to take. Because they found 4 entrances in the surroundings. There was a stone sculpture in each of the 4 directions. They were all big monsters that ran rampant in the world. It seemed that choosing any one of them would not end well. However, at this moment, someone suddenly shouted, "Where are Filial Sun and Guizi?" Where did they go? Filial Sun and Guizi were the 2 disciples of the Ni family who had just died. Hearing the noise, Hellion Vivian immediately turned around. The 2 corpses that were originally lying on the ground were really gone. There was no trace left behind. How did they disappear? Was there someone else in this graveyard other than them? Or were they moving corpses? But would there be a shadow of a moving corpse? Where were they? Questions popped up one after another. The mature exorcists did not care. After all, even if they were moving corpses, they were not afraid. The yellow talismans on them were enough to deal with it. However, Ni who did not have much ability, was a little scared. He did not pay attention to his feet and accidentally bumped into the corpse puppet on the stone statue behind him. A dull creaking sound came from all directions just like that. Come and update tomorrow. Moi. Chapter 748. What's that sound? Ni who was already scared. Now that he heard the sound again, he turned around to look. The exorcists slowly widened their eyes and shouted, it's a corpse puppet. Get out of the way. Ni, who also noticed that less than 10 centimeters away from him, the black worm that was originally attached to the stone statue had awakened. Its hard antennae stretched forward like two sharp bayonets, moving quickly in the direction of where he was standing. Ni, who was so scared that his legs turned to jelly. He supported himself with both hands on the ground and retreated backward as if he was running for his life. As he retreated, he shouted at the top of his lungs, "Father, save me." That appearance of his, who was scared witless, was indescribably embarrassing. Ni Biao was too far away to help him. The exorcists closest to Ni who could not care less about winning or losing. They could not just watch Ni who die. He threw the dog blood-red rope in his hand forward and lifted him up. With a tug, he was finally able to avoid the danger of having his stomach ripped open by the corpse puppet. Ni who did not relax immediately because the corpse puppet was aiming at him. There was no way to get rid of it. After he stood still, he hurriedly took out all the things in his bag. He had no idea how to deal with the corpse puppet. If Ni Feng had not reminded him to use the yellow talisman to ignite the fire, he was afraid that he would not know what to do. With a solution, Ni who was no longer afraid. He took out all the yellow talismans on him, ignited them with spiritual energy, and threw them at the corpse puppet. There was a whoosh. The entire corpse puppet was set ablaze by him. It was originally something from the graveyard, so it was destroyed very quickly by the spiritual fire. Listening to the crackling sounds, Ni who heaved a sigh of relief and fell to the ground. However, Elderly shouted at this moment. He kept muttering, "Oh no, oh no." Ni who did not have the chance to ask what was wrong. Behind the corpse puppet that he had burned to death, a large number of black objects surged towards him like fast-flowing water, accompanied by creaking sounds that made one's hair stand on end. Ni who was dumbfounded. His eyes slowly widened and his calves began to twitch violently. He did not even know how many times he had swallowed his saliva. A person's survival instinct would unleash unlimited potential. Ni who did not hesitate and quickly ran to the back. He needed a scapegoat. Beligaju happened to be standing behind him. As long as he ran past the man, the corpse puppets would be able to devour this arrogant layman. In this way, no one would think that he was a coward. In order to save his life, Ni whose mind was extremely vicious. As he ran, the exorcists were stunned and quickly spread out in all directions. Everyone took out a yellow talisman. Ni who was sweating profusely from running. After he ran past Beligaju, he slowed down and quickly dodged to the side. He pressed his hands on his knees and panted as he looked at Beligaju who was about to face the tide of corpse puppets. The corners of his mouth curled upward. "I don't believe that I can't kill you this time. Brother Ju." Zhuge widened his eyes and wanted to rush over with his mahogany sword. However, there was no time left. The corpse puppets came too fast and were about to reach Beligaju's feet. The exorcists around wanted to save him, but it was too late. "Brother Ju." Zhuge Yun's voice became heart-wrenching. Everyone thought that Beligaju was definitely going to die this time. Pity began to show in their eyes. However, Beligaju smiled. Under the brilliance of the torch, he became more and more beautiful and evil at the same time, just like the red spider lily in full bloom in the demon world. He was indescribably handsome. He raised his head slightly. The lines of his jawbone were like a quiet and secluded bay, so cold and noble that people could not take their eyes off him. The black feathers that symbolized sin, darkness, and greed fell in places where people could not see them. The devil's song was played. Together with his long robe, it slowly fluttered as if it could embrace the stars in the sky. The wind blew from all directions, fluttering Bailey Jia Ju's ink-black hair. He stood there, refusing to be enslaved. He was aloof and indifferent, with a hint of evil, filled with a dark aura that humans could not see. He looked at the tide of corpse puppets and narrowed his eyes. His tone was full of warning. His white robe fluttered loudly, shattering all the peace in the cemetery. "Get lost." With just one word, all the exorcists saw the most incredible scene. The zombie corpses that were wildly extending their tentacles actually stopped their attack. It was as if they had encountered some kind of obstacle. They began to retreat in all directions, but they did not dare to move toward Bailey Jiaju. The exorcists were stunned. They felt like they were dreaming. How much spiritual power did he have to be able to win without a fight? He did not even have to move, yet he was able to tame all the corpse puppets. It can't be. How is that possible? Did he do anything just now? No, he only said, "Get lost." Zhuge Yun tugged Hellion Vivian's sleeve excitedly. "Brother Wei, did you see that?" Brother Zhu only said, "Get lost," and those corpse puppets seemed to have understood his words. They were so scared that they all ran away. Hellion Vivian touched the bridge of her nose. She thought to herself, when we were at the Zonghai waterfall, he only said, "Get lost," to the so-called big demon, and it was already so scared. Poor demon, it must still be submerged in the water, not daring to show its head. Hellion Vivian had to admit that she understood the demon's feelings very well. However, it did not show its head now, not only because it was scared, but also because it was dressing up. That's right, dressing up. A demon that did not look like a human was looking at itself in a bronze mirror underwater, thinking that it was going to see its king again. The excitement in its heart was absolutely indescribable. As long as its king did not turn it into ashes, it would accept any punishment. The demon nodded at itself in the mirror, sincerely thinking that it was adorable. However, it did not know that the corpse puppets in the graveyard had not even figured out the identity of the man standing in front of them. Their internal organs were already hurting from the pressure of the demon's aura. Aren't they all humans? Why is there a fake one? The corpse puppets ran away in panic as if they were facing a great enemy. They huddled back in the same way they came out. Their movements were neat, and their steps were standard. They were afraid that if they were too late, they would be crushed by the man's foot. Oh my God, it's too scary. Hellion Vivian also felt that His Highness's attack on the demons was so strong that it was almost inhumane. Thinking about it, little Zhuge Yun was already in position. You should at least wait for him to raise his sword and kill a corpse puppet before telling them to get lost. Chapter 749. Before they even started, the other side had already ended. This saying was very suitable for the Ni family. Initially, they were prepared to show off their skills after the zombie had swept past them. Be it the disciples of the Ni family or Ni Biao himself, they did not expect such a shocking scene to happen. Ni Hu stood on the spot and muttered to himself, "This is impossible. How is this possible?" Even Old Li was dumbfounded. He had lived for more than half of his life and had raided many tombs, but he had never seen anyone who could make the zombie obediently give way with just the word "scram." This was simply amazing. Baligaju did not think much of it and just strolled toward Hellion Vivian. His slender hands were not stained with any dust, and his sleeves and collar were exquisite and elegant, which set off his tall and straight body vividly. Compared to Baligaju's almost elegant posture, Ni Hu's performance just now was not even passable. It was fine if he did not shout, but once he did, the other teams of exorcists all looked at him with obvious mockery in their eyes. Before the zombie had awakened, Ni Hu's words were still vivid in his mind. Relying on the fact that his sister was the reincarnation of the Phoenix girl, he looked down on everyone. He said things like, "My sister has always been knowledgeable and low-key, unlike some people who only know a little and insist on showing it. I'm afraid they're just talking. When they really encounter something later, who knows how scared they'll be. Take these corpse puppets for example. Some people are probably still having a headache over how to deal with them. And the result? He was the one who only knew how to talk, but he was the one who was scared out of his wits." After this incident, the other exorcists had seen through Ni Hu. Basically, no one would believe anything he said anymore, and they all looked at him with disdain. Ni who opened his mouth and swallowed the words that he wanted to say. He also realized the situation he was in, and an awkward expression appeared on his face. Ni Biao's eyes were extremely gloomy. Obviously, Bailey Jiaju's valiant ability had exceeded his expectations. If they didn't get rid of Zhuge Yun's team now, when they got the Saraira, it would be troublesome as to how to split it. It seemed that he had no choice but to use some tricks. Thinking of this, Ni Biao's eyes flickered. He winked at one of the deputies who was lurking in another team. The deputy immediately understood and nodded slightly. Even so, the Ni family's image was greatly tarnished in front of the exorcists. On the contrary, the Zhuge family's performance had left them speechless. Thinking about it carefully, Zhuge Yun didn't do anything. On the contrary, the two so-called exorcist laymen, one was proficient in ancient tombs, and the other was powerful. The combination of these two people could be called perfect. Young Master Yun, where did you find this expert? He's too powerful. Is he a bounty exorcist? It should be very expensive, right? Facing the envious questions of the people, Zhuge Yun was somewhat at a loss for words. He touched his head and felt that it was difficult to answer because until now, other than the names of his two benefactors, he didn't even know where they came from. Beligaju's performance not only attracted the attention of the exorcists, but also attracted Ni Feng's attention. In fact, she had noticed this man long ago. She had seen so many exorcists, but she had never seen one like this person, who was so handsome and powerful that it made her heart flutter. Thinking of this, Ni Feng's face, which was covered by a white veil, could not help but feel a little hot. If she could team up with this man, she would be able to find the Saraira faster. Unfortunately, he was not in the Ni family's team. But it didn't matter, she would spare his life when the time came. As for the others, especially the one who always stood by her side and showed off his knowledge, she would kill all of them who deserved to be killed. Alright, now we have to choose one of the four paths. Which one do you think is better? Old Li turned around and asked the exorcists behind him. How would they know? They looked at each other, and there was no consensus on what to say. Zhuge Yun felt that it was safest to ask the person standing beside him for this kind of question, so he lowered his voice and asked, Brother Wei, which one do you think is better? South. Hellion Vivian answered with certainty, and her voice was very soft. Unless it was someone who was very close to them, the other exorcists would not be able to hear it at all. Zhuge Yun was puzzled. Why? Everyone was puzzled. How could she be so sure? Hellion Vivian looked indifferent. There is no why, it's just a general reasoning. The place with the most corpse puppets would definitely be the burial area with the most corpses. Basically, they are all maids and the like. There would not be a main coffin in such a place. Think about it, which king would be willing to sleep with so many people? The closest coffin to him would at most have 1 or 2 corpses, so it would definitely not be the east gate. What about the west and north gates? Why not? After listening to Hellion Vivian's words, Zhuge Yun wanted to know the other answers even more. Hellion Vivian pointed at the place where the people had just died. This is the closest to the west gate. When we were studying the statue, the west gate was the only blind spot, so it is very likely that the 2 disciples of the Ni family ran in this direction after they came back to life. How can a living person walk in a dead person's door? As for why it's not the north gate, in terms of feng shui, no one would like to face the north after they died. You should know. Zhuge Yun wanted to cry, but no tears came out. Feng shui did mention that the north was ominous, so coffins should not be placed there. However, he had long forgotten about it. Moreover, she could still remember feng shui under such circumstances. He was really impressed. The main thing was that ordinary people would not be able to see the whole picture, and even notice the blind spot. Even he himself wanted to ask, where did he find these 2 people? Too awesome. Just as Zhuge Yun's blood was boiling, the eldest daughter of the Ni family, who was standing a few steps behind him, suddenly opened her mouth. There was a comforting gentleness in her voice. It's better to go through the south gate. Zhuge Yun was shocked. He turned around abruptly and looked at Ni Feng. Although he did not want to admit it, the eldest daughter of the Ni family was indeed capable. Zhuge Yun thought silently and was about to express his respect to Ni Feng. Just then, he heard Elder Li ask why. Ni Feng coughed softly a few times, as if she was thinking carefully, then she said her answer, because there will be a lot of corpses in a place with a lot of corpse puppets. Chapter 750. A place like this should be a burial place for maids and servants. There would not be a main coffin. No king would be willing to sleep with so many people. There would only be 1 or 2 coffins and corpses closest to him, so it definitely wouldn't be the East Gate. Zhuge Yun listened to Ni Feng's explanation. It was 90% similar to Brother Wei's explanation. At first, he thought it was just a coincidence. In the end, when Ni Feng explained why she did not choose the West Gate, she used the words blind spot. Zhuge Yun's eyes widened in shock. This is clearly what Brother Wei said just now. No matter how young Zhuge Yun was, he was not stupid to the point where he could not see the current situation. Ni Feng knew why the South Gate was a good choice because she eavesdropped on his conversation with Brother Wei. In other words, she stole Brother Wei's explanation. Zhuge Yun was so angry that his eyes turned red. He wanted to rush forward and confront Ni Feng, but was stopped by Hellion Vivian. Brother Wei, why are you stopping me? Zhuge Yun gritted his teeth in annoyance. You heard what Ni Feng said. She only knew the answer because she eavesdropped on our conversation. Now she thinks that she came up with it herself. She's so shameless. Hellion Vivian calmly said, if you rush out like this, what evidence do you have to prove that she was eavesdropping and not thinking of it herself? Zhuge Yun was stunned. Yes, what evidence do I have? This kind of thing belongs to whoever says it first. The light in Hellion Wei's eyes was very faint, and there was even a hint of a smile at the corner of her mouth. Ni Feng is so unscrupulous because she knows this. Look at everyone's expressions, it's obvious that they already believe Ni Feng's words. If you argue now, it will make people think that I'm stealing the credit. Zhuge Yun finally noticed that not only the exorcists, but even Elder Li was looking at Ni Feng with admiration. It was as if they really thought that she was an immortal. This kind of woman is definitely not the reincarnation of the Phoenix Girl. Zhuge Yun said angrily, the exorcist that I want to see is definitely not like her. I really want the real Phoenix Girl to come here and expose this hypocritical woman. Hellion Vivian coughed softly, reached out and patted him on the shoulder. She smiled meaningfully, maybe your wish can come true. How is that possible? Zhuge Yun laughed bitterly and glared fiercely at Ni Feng. Ni Feng, on the other hand, was as gentle as ever. It was as if she was the one who came up with those reasons and it had nothing to do with anyone else. Ni Hu and Ni Biao naturally felt the same way. No matter how powerful the others were, they had the reincarnation of the Phoenix Girl in their family. Hellion Vivian narrowed her eyes as she watched this scene. She began to seriously consider whether she should fulfill Zhuge Yun's wish. Of course. The bigger fetus waved his little hand and said arrogantly, Mother, that woman who impersonated you is too disgusting. Just looking at her will affect my appetite. The smaller fetus opened his eyes weakly and looked at his older brother enviously. His older brother was always full of energy, unlike him. He could not help his mother at all. When he got out, he must work harder. The bigger fetus did not know what the smaller fetus was thinking, but he did not forget to take care of him when he moved, acting like a good older brother. In the graveyard, the large group entered from the south gate. It was a peaceful journey and they did not encounter any danger. When they reached the second level, Hellion Vivian moved her arm. She felt as if there was something pressing on it. It was so heavy that it was difficult to even lift it up. Ni Biao felt that this could not go on. If they were all led by his daughter, they would definitely reach the top together in the end. Why should he let others take advantage of this? This was a competition to see who could obtain the Saraira. Since it was a competition, they should follow the rules. Everyone, my friends, please listen to me. Ni Biao put one hand behind his back and said in a dignified manner, now that we have safely entered the second level of the graveyard, according to the rules of the competition, once we reach the graveyard, we can choose a team again. If you choose to follow the Ni family, we will be the winner. If you choose not to follow the Ni family, we can only go our separate ways. Now, there are 2 gates in front of you. Let Elderly write 2 slips of paper. Whichever gate you grab, you will follow the team you choose. Out of the 4 major factions, only 3 were left, and one of them was empty. The exorcists gradually felt the strain. The 1,000-year-old ancient tomb was not like the outside world, where they only needed to learn how to exorcise. There were too many things that they did not understand. Obviously, if they followed the Ni family, everything would not be a problem anymore. Hence, the Ni family took 27 out of the 36 people in the team. Zhuge Yun and the rest were in the same faction and did not merge with the Ni family. Surprisingly, the 6 people in the other 2 teams chose to stand behind Hellion Vivian and the rest. Ni Biao sneered at this result. Those who did not choose the Ni family were just sending themselves to their deaths. They would definitely not be able to reach the main coffin. Zhuge Yun, on the other hand, was very excited. When they set off, there were only 3 of them, but now there were 9 of them. The feeling was indescribable. Hellion Vivian and the rest were in the same group. Zhuge Yun was the one who grabbed the slips of paper, and they had to go through the left gate. The 9 of them walked in one after another. They did not encounter anything bad. It was too peaceful along the way. They did not even hear a sound when they walked down. This made them even more worried. After walking for half an hour, there was still no end to the tunnel-like stone path in front of them. Hellion Vivian frowned. She reached out her hand and made a mark on the big stone before continuing to walk. This time was the same as the previous time. Nothing happened. However, Hellion Vivian's expression changed. She stopped and said faintly, "We don't have to walk anymore." What? Some of the exorcists asked in confusion. Some of the exorcists understood, "We really don't have to walk anymore. We've been walking in circles." In the beginning, it was too peaceful. This calmness made them let down their guard. Coupled with the physical and mental fatigue, they forgot to make a mark. When they saw Hellion Vivian making a mark, they suddenly realized. Their backs were drenched in cold sweat, and they lowered their voices. "We might have encountered a ghost wall." You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.